Her sister had once been the dawn in the bleak landscape of her life. Sienna would have given anything for Lorena, right up until her very last breath. Imprisoned in the dungeon, Sienna stared at her sister's triumphant smile. Only then did she realize that the person who had always seemed to care so deeply for her actually hated her with a burning passion, a hatred that wished her dead. Because she possessed no magic, Sienna, a worthless, lowly adopted daughter, was treated with coldness and disdain in this household. Grand Duke Nate, her adoptive father, scorned her uselessness. Her brothers wanted her gone. Everyone despised her. Only Lorena, her sister, the gifted girl who basked in everyone's adoration, seemed to care. But naive Sienna had no idea that it was all an act, a manipulation designed to make her the scapegoat for all of Lorena's misdeeds. Now, locked away in the Grand Duke's dungeon, Sienna finally saw the venomous truth of Lorena's nature. In despair, she took out the poison she carried and swallowed it all. But Lorena wouldn't allow her such an easy death. She wanted Sienna to suffer, to writhe in agony. Separated by the bars of the cell, Lorena could only scream her rage as Sienna closed her eyes in pain. Finally, she could end this life, a life where she was loved by no one. But fate had other plans. Sienna opened her eyes to find herself back at the beginning at the Kendall orphanage. Today was the day Grand Duke Nate came to choose a child. All the orphans were gathered. Here at the orphanage, the children held the potential to become mages. The ability to wield magic was the key to being chosen by the nobles. Sienna and Lorena weren't blood sisters. They were both adopted, taken under the guardianship of the Nate family. Though adopted by nobility among nobles, Sienna hadn't shown any magical aptitude. In stark contrast to Lorena, the gifted girl, Sienna was nothing more than an unwanted burden, having lived through the misery of her past life. Sienna refused to repeat her mistakes. In her previous life, it was a stumble in front of the Grand Duke that had caught his attention. This time, she would be careful. Lost in thought, she didn't realize Grand Duke Nate had arrived. The man, with his dark hair, crimson eyes, and stern face, stood before the line of children, each waiting for a touch of fortune. Only Sienna felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She silently prayed he would just walk past, just a little longer. This time, everything would be different. The man's footsteps drew closer. He stopped right in front of her. Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. No, it couldn't be. To her astonishment, the man bent down on one knee. He looked at her, his voice gentle. "Would you like to come with me to the Nate estate?" The most esteemed Grand Duke in the Empire, kneeling before an orphan, asking to take her home as his daughter. But Sienna wanted nothing to do with it, because in her past life, after becoming his adopted daughter, she had been framed by her seemingly kind sister and ultimately rejected by the Grand Duke and her brothers. It had ended with her taking her own life in despair. Given a second chance, Sienna refused to relive that nightmare. Grand Duke Nate remained kneeling, waiting for her answer. A nudge from someone beside her brought Sienna back to the present. She offered a polite curtsy. The Grand Duke's unusual behavior was unsettling. Something felt different, but she still didn't want to return to that nightmarish place. Before she could refuse, a wave of dizziness swept over her as she collapsed. The Grand Duke's face filled with alarm as he reached for her. She instinctively turned her head away, falling to the ground. Through the haze, Sienna saw the Grand Duke's concerned expression. Was he worried about her? Impossible. How could he possibly care about me? The Empire's war against the monstrous hordes was ceaseless. In this state of constant preparation, mages were invaluable. Nobles adopted gifted commoners, even arranging marriages between their own children and these adopted mages, all to cultivate a more powerful magical bloodline. Grand Duke Nate, Sienna, and Lorena's guardian, was nobility among nobles, the commander of the Empire's mage army. Sienna recalled the first time she met Lorena. Back then, she was timid and shy, offering a hasty curtsy. But Lorena was vibrant and outgoing. She took Sienna's hand warmly. "You can call me sister from now on," Lorena had said. "I've always wanted a little sister." Her bright, dazzling smile had captivated Sienna. From then on, they were like sisters. Lorena came to see Sienna every day. She even invited Sienna to her home. Unlike Sienna, an orphan, Lorena had parents. They welcomed Sienna with equal warmth. The loving, harmonious atmosphere of their family gave Sienna a sense of warmth she'd never known. Until one night, Lorena came to Sienna with a magic book in her arms. She wanted to try the spells within it with Sienna. An unsettling aura emanated from the book, making Sienna instinctively recoil. But seeing her sister's eager expression, she agreed. Lorena wanted to share some of her magic. "You have almost no magic," she told Sienna. Sienna's blood ran cold. The Grand Duke had adopted her, believing she possessed magic. What was she going to do? "I have plenty of magic," Lorena reassured her. "I can share some with you." But Sienna refused. Wouldn't that be deceiving the Grand Duke? "Do you want to go back to the orphanage?" Lorena asked. "I want us to stay sisters forever." Lorena's words silenced Sienna. She didn't want to go back. No one had ever been as kind to her as Lorena. No matter the cost, Sienna thought, "I have to stay here." Looking into Lorena's earnest eyes, she agreed. "Don't worry," Lorena said. "This will be our little secret." And so, they performed the magic to transfer Lorena's power. That night marked the beginning of Sienna's tragic fate. How foolish it was to blindly trust someone. Now, fate had given her a second chance. Even if it meant enduring the hardships of the orphanage, she would never entangle herself with Lorena again. As Sienna's consciousness returned, she saw the Grand Duke arresting the orphanage director. He was going to be punished. The manipulative sister, to maintain her position as the favored child, had pretended to care for her sister while secretly stealing her magical talent. She had even framed her sister for her own misdeeds. Poor Sienna, only learning the truth on the brink of death. All the suffering she had endured for so many years had been orchestrated by the sister she trusted most. Just moments ago, Grand Duke Nate had looked at Sienna, lying unconscious, lost in thought. Was she trying to avoid me just now? He wondered. Perhaps she was just nervous. The Grand Duke suddenly noticed Sienna's frail physique. It wasn't just her. All the children in the orphanage were gaunt and pale, clearly suffering from long-term malnutrition. This orphanage received ample funding to nurture these magically gifted children. With the children living like this, the director must have been embezzling the funds. The Grand Duke gave the order to remove the director from his position. The director tried to argue, claiming it was unfair for the Grand Duke to punish him so severely over one little girl. The Grand Duke's voice was stern, brooking no argument. The director was dragged away. Sienna woke at that very moment. Her eyes met the Grand Duke's. The cold, stern expression he'd worn moments before hadn't yet faded. Sienna's heart lurched. Had he seen how weak she was? Did he no longer want to adopt her? Seizing the opportunity, Sienna burrowed into Lisa's arms, feigning fragility. She pleaded with Lisa, her voice small, not to be taken to the Nate estate. She would be good. She promised obedient. She would eat only a little food each day. She just wanted to stay at the orphanage. Seeing the Grand Duke's rising concern, Lisa quickly interjected. "She's still so young," she said. "I'll talk to her." Suddenly, Sienna burst into tears, all the suppressed anguish pouring out. An aide quickly advised the Grand Duke to relent for the moment. The instant Sienna heard the Grand Duke say he wouldn't force her to go, her tears stopped. Seeing this, the Grand Duke had no choice but to leave, a look of resignation on his face. Lisa continued to hold Sienna, murmuring soft reassurances. Feeling the genuine warmth of Lisa's comfort, Sienna truly understood. What Lorena had shown her was a sinister intent hidden beneath sweet words and gentle smiles. And Sienna hadn't realized it until she was on the brink of death. Her stolen magic, her life of humiliation, all thanks to the sister she had loved with all her being. If she had stayed with Lisa all those years ago, would her life have been better? Lisa looked at Sienna's pale face, her heart aching with pity. She was thinking about how she would take better care of Sienna from now on, when the door burst open. Both Lisa and Sienna gasped. It was the orphanage director. Hadn't the Grand Duke taken him away? The enraged man lunged forward and grabbed Sienna's hair. "You wretched girl," he snarled. "I won't let you get away with this." He yanked on her golden hair, his grip brutal, ready to unleash his fury. It was Sienna's unexpected collapse that had exposed his abuse of the orphans. He had spent all his savings to make bail, and now he blamed Sienna for everything. Lisa tried to intervene, but he shoved her aside. Just as Sienna felt herself choking, a voice rang out from behind. "Take your hands off her!" Before the director could even see who it was, a fist slammed into his face, sending him sprawling. Sienna looked up and met the man's gaze. It was Assel, Grand Duke Nate's eldest son, the young master. He wasn't someone who usually lost his temper like this. Both Assel and his father enter the room. Watching the orphanage director being dragged away, Sienna felt a wave of fear wash over her. Why was her life constantly filled with such pain? And she was utterly powerless to resist. Was the Grand Duke's protection the only way she could survive? Lisa hugged Sienna, who was lost in thought, assuming she was too frightened to even cry. The orphanage was no longer a safe place for her. Realizing this, Grand Duke Mate addressed Sienna again, his voice solemn. "Will you come with me to the Nate estate?" There was a hint of pleading in his eyes. It was the first time Sienna had ever seen him look like this. Was her magical talent truly that valuable? Was he this insistent on adopting her even after she had refused him repeatedly? In her past life, she had been consumed by guilt, believing she had stolen Lorena's magic. That guilt had driven her to try her best in everything. She had imitated Lorena's handwriting, written letters for her, even endured the pain in her fingers to brush her sister's hair, all at Lorena's behest. But in Assel's eyes, none of it had mattered. The family didn't need a diligent woman. They needed a powerful mage. All her pointless efforts had led to a miserable death. This time, she had to change her fate. Even if the orphanage got a new director, who could guarantee he would be any better? He might even be worse. If she chose to go to the Nate estate, if she went, she would meet Lorena in 6 months. But this time, armed with the memories of her past life, she could avoid Lorena's betrayal entirely. After careful consideration, Sienna finally decided she would go to the Nate estate. Assel, the eldest son of a noble family, felt a strange pull towards the orphan girl he had just met. He wanted nothing more than to be by her side to protect her. So, when he saw the orphanage director strike Sienna, rage ignited within him. He rushed forward and knocked the director to the ground. When he saw Sienna's reluctance to go to the Nate estate, he even suggested that Lisa, the caretaker Sienna clearly adored, become the new director, hoping to sway the girl. Reborn into this life, determined to secure a stable future, Sienna finally agreed to go to the Nate estate and become the Grand Duke's adopted daughter. Sienna clung to Lisa, reluctant to let go. She avoided the Grand Duke's outstretched arms and held Lisa tightly. Lisa gently lifted Sienna into the carriage. She made a promise to Sienna that she would visit her often, and Sienna, in turn, promised to live well and be a good, kind child. On the way back to the estate, the three sat in the carriage in silence. Both father and son looked out the window, the atmosphere slightly awkward. Sienna considered thanking them, but decided against it. She no longer wanted to make a conscious effort to be a good child. By the time they arrived at the Nate estate, Sienna had fallen asleep. The Grand Duke carefully carried her from the carriage. Assel reached out to take Sienna from his father, but the Grand Duke declined. "Don't you have things to attend to?" he asked. Assel did have responsibilities, but he didn't want to leave Sienna. He couldn't explain this feeling of concern. The Grand Duke's younger son, Michael, saw his father carrying a girl and rushed over, curious. "Is that the child?" he asked, only to be shushed by his father for being too loud and disturbing Sienna's sleep. Michael then turned to his older brother. "Will she be staying with us?" he asked. Assel confirmed that she would. Reassured, the boy relaxed. The Grand Duke gently placed Sienna on the bed. Assel watched Sienna's peaceful sleeping face, noticing the focused gazes of his father and brother. All three of them were acting differently than usual, showing unusual care for this girl they had just met. A deranged sister, desperate to maintain her favored status, uses cruel methods to drive her kind younger sister to death. Sienna, reborn, encounters her sister Lorena once again. Lorena confronts her, her voice filled with madness. "You stole my place. Are you happy now?" Sienna felt a chill run down her spine. Even though she now knew Lorena's true, vicious nature, years of being manipulated by her sister had conditioned her to obey. Panic seized Sienna, and she jolted awake. It was just a dream, but as she took in her surroundings, her composure shattered. She was in the room Lorena had occupied in her past life, the Cradle of the Moon. Sienna remembered being assigned to a simple room in her past life and being overjoyed. Compared to the orphanage, it had felt luxurious. But Lorena had scoffed. She had set her sights on a different room and dragged Sienna along to see it. The Cradle of the Moon, lavishly decorated and cozy, was the finest room in the estate, aside from the Grand Dukes and Assel's. It even had an adjoining room for a maid. Lorena had declared it perfect for her, adding that when Sienna came to visit, she could sleep in the maid's quarters. and the Grand Duke had agreed to Lorena's demand. Sienna's initial joy at having a new room had evaporated, replaced by a familiar pang of disappointment at this blatant favoritism. Now, all she wanted was to be as far away from Lorena as possible. The terror of her nightmare clung to her, making her skin crawl. I can't stay in this room, Sienna thought, a shiver tracing her spine. It could cause unnecessary misunderstandings. It's better to go back to the room I had before. Sienna fumbled through the darkened hallways, searching. Unable to see clearly, she stumbled and injured her leg. Biting back the pain, she finally found her old room. Although the bed was covered only with a dust sheet, she fell into a peaceful sleep. The next morning, Deborah, the newly appointed headmaid, was assigned to Sienna. Deborah was intensely curious about this child from the orphanage. What extraordinary talent must she possess to be given the cradle of the moon, she wondered. But despite knocking repeatedly, there was no answer. She pushed the door open. The room was empty. The new young miss was gone. The servants searched everywhere, from the drawing room to the study, but found no trace of her. Resigned, Deborah reported Sienna's disappearance to the Grand Duke. He was furious. So many of you, and you can't even keep track of one child? Deborah now understood just how important Sienna was to the Grand Duke. He set aside his work and went to search for the girl himself. Leaving the comfort of a warm, plush bed, she had chosen to sleep on a hard, dusty mattress. All because, in her past life, that grand bed had belonged to Lorena. Unwilling to relive the entanglement with her venomous sister, Sienna had crept into her former room in the dark. Deborah, discovering Sienna missing from the cradle of the moon early that morning, rushed to inform the Grand Duke. Upon hearing the news, he immediately joined the search. The servants were astonished that the Grand Duke would personally search for an orphan. Could she be hidden royalty? They whispered amongst themselves. Just as the Grand Duke's anxiety reached its peak, a premonition guided him. He turned and walked toward a specific room. The feeling was the same as that day at the orphanage. He had never met this girl before, yet he felt an undeniable connection to her. Looking at the closed door, he was certain Sienna was inside, but the room was empty. Still, there were signs that someone had been there. Did she really sleep in this dirty, cold room all night? He wondered, his gaze falling on the dust-covered sheet. His heart ached for Sienna. Then, a startling splash of crimson on the sheet caught his eye. Is she injured? He immediately ordered all the servants to search the surrounding area. When only Deborah remained in the room, a wardrobe against the wall suddenly creaked open. Deborah watched, stunned, as Sienna crawled out. Sienna whispered, urging her to be quiet and not alert anyone else. Sienna explained that when she woke up that morning, she realized that disappearing on her first day would surely result in the servants being punished by the Grand Duke. She would be resented by everyone. Just as she was about to return to the cradle of the moon, the commotion outside had frightened her, sending her scrambling into the wardrobe. Deborah, Sienna pleaded, when you take me out, just say you found me. That way, the Grand Duke won't punish them, will he? Deborah was astonished. You're trying to help me? She hadn't expected such thoughtful consideration from someone so young. She carried Sienna to the Grand Duke. Seeing the girl safe and sound, he finally relaxed. He reached out to her, wanting to hold her and tend her injured leg. He simply wanted to embrace his new daughter. But Sienna flinched away, because in her past life, she had been falsely accused by Lorena, and the Grand Duke had become an unwitting accomplice in her demise. Seeing her recoil, the Grand Duke withdrew his hand. The doctor bandaged Sienna's leg and offered her sweets to cheer her up. Sienna's mind drifted back to her past life. Even when sick or injured, she could only get medicine after Lorena lost her memory. The kindness she was now experiencing felt like she had stepped into another world. The Grand Duke asked her, "Why did you go sleep in that other small room?" "Because the room here was too nice," Sienna murmured. "I didn't think it could possibly be meant for me." The Grand Duke fell silent. The servants present felt a pang of sympathy. This child was truly pitiful. Sienna looked at the Grand Duke's expression. It was the same as back at the orphanage. His eyes held a carefully suppressed pain. I don't know why he gave me such a nice room, she thought. But there's no need to ask. I don't want to get too involved with them anyway. Because even if they're kind to me now, she reasoned internally, this kindness will shift to Lorena when she arrives. Meaningless questions only bring hope, and I don't have any hope for them. Sienna bowed her head and apologized. I won't make everyone worry like that again. The Grand Duke wanted to ask more, but felt it would sound like he was blaming her. It's not your fault. You don't need to apologize, he said gently. You just need to know that the cradle of the moon is your room. If I have to give this room back when Lorena comes, Sienna mused, it's better to find a reason to refuse it now. Wait, if I offer the room to Lorena when she arrives, maybe she won't be hostile towards me. In that case, I'll stay in the maid's quarters next to the Cradle of the Moon. Sienna's quiet demeanor tugged at the Grand Duke's heart. At the orphanage, she had been a child who cried and clung to Lisa. Now, she was as sensible as an adult. Perhaps she just needs time to adjust, he thought. Deborah, the head maid, couldn't understand the new young miss either. She lived in such a beautiful room, yet she seemed constantly melancholic. When Deborah came to deliver breakfast and pushed the door open, she found Sienna gone again. The girl poked her head out from the maid's quarters. Deborah was surprised, but Sienna simply said, "I'm comfortable here. If I stay here," she reasoned internally, "they'll probably give up on me soon." Sienna picked up her knife and fork and began to eat. Deborah observed her, curious. Despite being an orphan with no formal etiquette training, Sienna's table manners were remarkably refined, like those of a noble lady. The girl seems to have a strange affliction, Deborah thought. Sleeping in a luxurious bed gave her nightmares. Only on a hard mattress could she find peace. Even as she ate, Sienna could barely keep her eyes open. Perhaps children are just naturally sleepy, Deborah mused. Deborah, seeing the girl swaying on her feet, guided her to the large bed and helped her lie down. But the moment Sienna closed her eyes, terrifying dreams overwhelmed her. Lorena's voice echoed in her mind, a haunting whisper. Sienna jolted awake. She couldn't bear to touch this bed. It only brought nightmares. Quietly, she slipped out of bed, avoiding the maid, and crept back into the maid's quarters. Only here did she feel a semblance of peace. But even here, unpleasant memories from her past life surfaced. Because she wasn't liked. Whispers and rumors about her had been constant. That solitary orphan. She's the Grand Duke's adopted daughter, yet she spends her days doing nothing productive, always insisting on doing the maid's work. Does she want to be Lady Lorena's maid when she becomes the Grand Duchess? Does she even have the qualifications? She's so presumptuous. Even Lorena, who pretended to care for her, would subtly mock and belittle her. She would invite Sienna to gatherings, but only to turn around and say that everyone would be uncomfortable if Sienna went. Yet at the same time, Lorena would relentlessly brainwash her, drilling it into Sienna's head that no one in the world loved her except her sister. Faced with Lorena's years of mental manipulation, Sienna occasionally longed to get away from her, as far away as possible. When Lorena comes here in 6 months, Sienna worried. What will she think when she sees me occupying the Cradle of the Moon? Deborah, watching Sienna huddled in the maid's quarters, felt a surge of exasperation. You should be spending more time in the Cradle of the Moon, she insisted. Sienna didn't understand. The Grand Duke was out hunting Boa Sug. Assel had returned to the military academy, and Michael was nowhere to be seen. Why was the head maid so fixated on her? Deborah was clearly displeased with Sienna constantly sleeping in the maid's quarters. It's an insult to the Grand Duke, she declared. But I lived there for most of my last life, Sienna thought. Isn't saying that an insult to me? Seeing Sienna's constant sighs, Deborah decided to drag her out for some sunshine and a tour of the Grand Duke's estate. Despite being smitten with the girl at first sight, the proud young master stubbornly tried to hide his feelings. But the girl remained utterly unfazed, even finding the situation absurd. Just moments ago, Deborah, the head maid, had forcibly dragged Sienna off on a tour of the Grand Mansion. Deborah chattered excitedly, describing everything in detail, but Sienna only felt bored. Having lived through it all once before, she was already intimately familiar with the estate. They arrived at the entrance to the second-floor exhibition hall. Deborah was about to launch into a detailed explanation when she noticed young Master Michael there as well. Seeing someone she'd rather avoid, Sienna hesitated, unsure whether to curtsy. After a moment's thought, she instinctively hid behind Deborah. Michael intensely disliked timid people. "See me like this," Sienna thought. "He'll probably leave quickly." Michael seemed to be exercising restraint. He sighed and told Deborah to go back. He would give Sienna the tour. Absolutely not, Sienna thought, but Deborah was more than happy to oblige. She gave Sienna a little push forward and vanished in an instant. As her only rescuer disappeared, Sienna heard the boy's sharp question, "Don't you curtsy when you see me?" His tone was unfriendly. "Don't think you can stay here forever," he warned. Sienna was used to this kind of remark. This young master was exactly the same as in her past life, constantly sneering that she was only fit to be a maid. Wouldn't it be better to just leave this place? She wondered. I'll just go along with what he wants. I was thinking the same thing, Sienna admitted frankly. Please rest assured. An orphan like me wouldn't dare dream of becoming a Nate. When the time is right, I'll go to the military academy. I won't be an eyesore to you. Michael's reaction was one of surprise. I wasn't trying to drive her away, he thought, flustered. How can she talk about leaving? This contradictory reaction confused Sienna. It also made Michael extremely awkward. He hurriedly tried to disguise his true feelings, turning to lead Sienna into the exhibition hall. You don't like me, do you? She asked. That doesn't mean I can break my promise, he mumbled. Sienna sighed. Then I'll have to trouble you. Michael explained everything diligently as they walked, but Sienna found the time excruciating. She was about to try and slip away when a dazzling light from a nearby display case caught her eye. What is this strange sense of déjà vu? She wondered. Michael followed her gaze. This is the flame of her sorrows, he explained. It's one of the named. The named are gods sealed within millennial incense. They're ancient legacies that can only be conquered by those who are qualified, Michael continued. There are 13 named in the world, and the Nates possess 4 of them. 2 belong to the Grand Duke and Assel, and another one's whereabouts are unknown. But this one here, the flame of her sorrows, has never been conquered by anyone. In her past life, Sienna, the girl everyone scorned, was now receiving the family's utmost care and concern. Even the young master, who had always spoken harshly to her, was now personally giving her a tour of the mansion. Staring at the divine artifact, Sienna was overwhelmed by a powerful sense of déjà vu. She remembered, in her past life, after stealing Sienna's magic, Lorena had touched the flame of her sorrows, causing a violent collision between the 2 powerful magical forces. Lorena had fallen into a coma for 2 weeks, and the flame of her sorrows had shattered in 2, vanishing mysteriously. When Lorena awoke, she was hailed as a genius who had conquered the divine artifact, and her fame spread far and wide. Wait, if Lorena's reaction to the flame of her sorrows was because she possessed Sienna's magic, then what would happen if Sienna touched it? Would she die? Lost in thought, Sienna's hand instinctively reached out towards the flame of her sorrows. Do you want to touch it? Michael's voice startled Sienna back to reality. She quickly apologized. It's all right. Even if you touched it, nothing would happen. Or would it? Sienna thought. Perhaps not yet. Best to keep it as a backup plan. Michael, seeing her hesitation, continued his explanation, but Sienna was utterly bored. She yawned widely. Michael bristled. You're not even listening, he exclaimed. I'm trying to explain this to you, and you're yawning? He was so angry, he practically vibrated with indignation. Finally, Sienna had some peace. But it didn't last. Deborah, the head maid, soon appeared. You need to get ready, she told Sienna. The Grand Duke has returned early after a successful hunt. There will be a formal family dinner tonight, and Assel will be there too. Oh no, Sienna thought. I really don't want to attend that. She tried to excuse herself, claiming she didn't know proper etiquette, but Deborah was adamant. Sienna had to be there. There's something good waiting for you, Deborah added mysteriously. Sienna only felt a creeping sense of dread. The grand mansion suddenly seemed ominously sinister. When she had first arrived in her past life, the sheer scale of the place had kept her awake at night. As the dining room doors slowly opened, revealing the 3 figures seated formally at the table, Sienna felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. She was still wearing the clothes she'd arrived in from the orphanage. Are they trying to intimidate me? She wondered. There's no need. I already know I don't belong here. Sienna noticed the pomegranates on the dining table. They were the symbol on the Nate family crest. It was unusual to see pomegranates used as table decorations. This dinner must be important, she thought. The Grand Duke's mansion was hosting a lavish and grand dinner, all for the arrival of a common orphan. But Sienna felt a deep sense of resistance. In her past life, she had been framed and tragically killed within these very walls. Now, facing the 3 people who had once been so indifferent to her, she couldn't bring herself to eat. Is the food not to your liking? Assel, noticing her downcast expression, asked gently. He noticed? Sienna thought, is he reprimanding me for being ungrateful? She stammered an apology. Assel looked flustered. He seemed to have realized she'd misunderstood him. Then the Grand Duke spoke, his voice soothing. You don't need to apologize if the food isn't to your liking, he said. If you don't like it, just leave it. He then instructed the butler to bring out new dishes. Sienna shook her head, refusing the offer. The Grand Duke observed her distant demeanor. Was I too hasty? The Grand Duke murmured, second-guessing his decision to bring Sienna to such a formal occasion. Let's proceed with the ritual then. He gestured for a servant to bring a plate of pomegranates. He then took a pomegranate and broke it open with his own hands, the crimson juice staining his fingers. The pomegranate was presented to Sienna. She stared at it, bewildered. What is the meaning of this? It was a innate family custom. When a new member joined the family, the head of the household would personally distribute pomegranate seeds for everyone to eat. It symbolized the entire family sharing blessings as numerous as the seeds of the fruit. But to Sienna, it didn't look like a pomegranate. It looked like raw, bleeding flesh. The ritual felt like a pack of wild beasts dividing their prey, savage and bloody. Watching the others partake, Sienna hesitantly picked up a seed and put it in her mouth. But a gruesome image flashed unbidden through her mind, nearly making her gag. Her scalp prickled, goosebumps erupting across her skin. The Grand Duke announced that Sienna was officially a member of the Nate family. Sienna couldn't comprehend it. She was just an orphan. Whatever expectations the Grand Duke had for her, she couldn't fulfill them. But the Grand Duke sensed her unease. "Those aren't the words of a child," he said, his brow furrowed. "Someone must be filling her head with nonsense." His gaze fell upon Deborah, the head maid, who was closest to Sienna. Deborah was taken aback, vehemently denying the accusation. She was utterly loyal. She would never say such things. Someone must have spoken to Sienna while she was away. "But now that Miss Sienna has eaten the pomegranate," Deborah said, "and is officially part of the family, such incidents shouldn't happen again." The butler chimed in, promising to discipline the staff. Deborah then suggested arranging a tutor for Sienna. Assel agreed. Her education couldn't be delayed. Michael, however, proposed that Sienna attend classes with him. Sienna was speechless. This morning he wanted me gone, and now he wants to share lessons? The Grand Duke agreed and instructed the staff to make the arrangements. He turned to Sienna, his voice earnest. "You are innate, recognized by me, so please don't let idle gossip bother you. Forget it all." The pitiful girl, once loathed by everyone, had been reborn and returned to the Grand Duke's mansion. Faced with the apparent concern of these three men, Sienna felt an overwhelming sense of resistance, especially when the Grand Duke told her to forget. It was laughable. The suffering she endured in her past life, the disdain and disgust these three had shown her, the pain she was forced to bear. How could she simply forget? You say forget so easily, but do you think my wounded heart can be healed with just those words? Even now, the memories bring such agonizing pain, I can barely breathe. Her outburst startled everyone present. Sienna, unable to stand any longer, collapsed to the floor. The Grand Duke rushed to her side, gathering her into his arms. He called for a doctor while softly comforting her. But Sienna recoiled from his touch. "I don't want to rely on you. And I beg you, leave me alone." Sienna struggled to push him away. This pretense of affection was suffocating. "You're so kind to me now, so you can manipulate me later?" In this terrifying house, she had already suffered unimaginable malice and died once. But even death had been undone. Must I endure it all again? Overwhelmed by the emotional onslaught, Sienna finally lost consciousness. The doctor examined her and concluded that she had fainted due to severe malnutrition and extreme stress. The Grand Duke was consumed by guilt. He had subjected such a frail child to such a stressful ordeal. Meanwhile, Sienna was once again lost in a nightmare. She dreamt of her past self, believing she had stolen her sister Lorena's magic. She was tormented by guilt, unable to sleep at night. To alleviate her guilt, she even volunteered for the most unpleasant chores. But it was all for naught. After exchanging magic with her sister, the resulting mark weighed on her, suffocating her. Even crying felt like an impossible luxury. Lorena had suggested that if she wanted to repay the Nate family's kindness, she should make a protective amulet for Assel, the eldest son. It was an essential tool for mages to ward off evil spirits. Sienna hesitated. Could she, with her meager magic, create such a thing? But was a chance to prove her worth, something more meaningful than cleaning. She had to try. Full of hope, the young girl presented the amulet to Assel, only to find it discarded in a dusty corner. Despair washed over Sienna. Her weak magic, her pricked and wounded hands, her desperate attempts to prove her worth, all discarded, meaningless. She recalled Assel's words, "Sienna, I know you try hard, but your efforts are worthless." It had all been an illusion. She had thought she could be of help. Lost in her despair, she ran into Michael, the younger son. He greeted her, with sarcasm. I envy how busy you are. He sneered. You know you're only fit to steal a maid's work. Why don't you just leave? Sienna tried to avoid conflict, but Michael continued his taunts. You'd never leave, lingering around my brother all day. What kind of daydream are you living in? Sienna knew he misunderstood her, but thinking about it, her desire to be useful, it seemed like a foolish dream. Am I not even allowed to dream? So shameless, Michael muttered, turning and walking away. Sienna jolted awake from her nightmare. The painful memories of her past life tormented her. She looked around and realized she was in the cradle of the moon, lying in Lorena's bed. Sleep was impossible. Fighting her discomfort, she slipped into the adjoining maid's quarters. Only in this small space could she find a moment's peace. But the next morning, Michael was furious when he saw her there. Deborah, the head maid, explained that Sienna had a fever and wandered into the maid's room in her delirium. Michael didn't believe it. Leaving a comfortable bed to sleep in a maid's quarters? Does that make any sense? He suspected Deborah's motives. You're only pretending to be nice to Sienna in front of my father, aren't you? Deborah felt unjustly accused. Before she could defend herself, Sienna spoke up. It was my choice to sleep here. Michael was still baffled. Why choose discomfort when you have better options? Sienna found his confusion ironic. Didn't you think my suffering was justified in my past life? Why the sudden curiosity now? The despised, unloved girl of her past life was now the cherished darling of the family. But the trauma of her past had left her disillusioned. Years of Lorena's manipulation had eroded her self-worth, leaving her feeling unworthy of love and any comfort. So she told Michael, the cradle of the moon is too grand. This maid's room reminds me of the orphanage. That's why I sleep here. But you are innate now. You ate the pomegranate. Though Michael had explained the significance of the pomegranate, Sienna wished she hadn't eaten it. She almost wanted to throw it up. Did you think I'd clap my hands with joy just because you called us family? How naive. Seeing the escalating tension, Deborah intervened, suggesting she needed to help Sienna get dressed. Michael then noticed Sienna was still in her nightgown. He flushed, realizing he had barged into her room early in the morning while she was still undressed. Muttering an apology, he quickly left. The doctor, having seen Sienna was all right, also took his leave. This doctor was new to Sienna. The previous one had always pretended not to know her, deliberately refusing her treatment. Unbeknownst to Sienna, that doctor had been demoted for failing to diagnose her typhoid fever. Now, the servants knew better than to neglect the young lady. Deborah attentively served Sienna her breakfast. Such solicitousness felt strange, but Sienna couldn't refuse. She ate obediently. Deborah informed Sienna of an important event. The Grand Duke had personally summoned a tailor to take her measurements for new clothes. Sienna couldn't understand the Grand Duke's sudden change of heart. He had been utterly indifferent to her in her past life. Deborah and the tailor sang her praises, complimenting Sienna's natural beauty and elegant demeanor. But Sienna, lacking in self-confidence, felt utterly insignificant. She was just an orphan. Only someone as radiant as Lorena was suited for such attention. Just as Sienna was feeling overwhelmed, a man entered, carrying a large bouquet of roses. Is Miss Sienna here? He inquired. It was the first time Sienna had received roses. She stared in disbelief. Are these for me? Looking at the 999 vibrant roses, Sienna felt no joy, only apprehension. The accompanying card read, wishing you a speedy recovery. Asil, the flowers were from the eldest son. The maids around her erupted in excited chatter. How romantic. Each rose is worth a gold coin. That expensive? Sienna thought. He could have just given me the money. I'll need it for military school. A thought struck Sienna. Asil had sent her flowers. Could a similar incident have caused Michael's misunderstanding in her past life? Had he thought she wanted to marry Asil? How absurd. Why would he think that? Unless, had Lorena orchestrated it? It was certainly within her capabilities. After all, Lorena had tricked her out of her witch's mark before. This time, Sienna wouldn't allow history to repeat itself. She first had a servant relay her gratitude to Asil. Then, she proposed sharing the flowers with everyone, explaining that at the orphanage, they always shared gifts. She wanted to share the joy with everyone present. This way, she could avoid any misunderstanding with Michael, and not disregard Asil's kind gesture. The servants were delighted to receive the roses, expressing their thanks to Sienna. Her popularity among the staff soared. Finally, Sienna gave a rose to the tailor, keeping only one for herself, along with the card. To express his gratitude, the tailor gifted Sienna a beautiful, ornate sample garment. It was the latest fashion, the designer's masterpiece, a true showstopper. The dress was stunning, but the color, it was bright yellow like a baby chick. Deborah, the head maid, beamed and happily accepted it on Sienna's behalf. With this dress, Miss Sienna can start her lessons tomorrow. So soon. That means it'll be that tutor who hates me, right? The tailor and Deborah reviewed the clothing list. Coats, dresses, everyday wear, nightgowns, formal gowns, cloaks, over 100 outfits in total. Isn't this too much? Sienna asked. Deborah produced a blank check signed by the Grand Duke. Don't worry, we can afford it. Sienna sighed. The world of the rich is beyond my comprehension. The next morning, Sienna donned the magnificent dress. Deborah gushed about how beautiful she looked, but Sienna found the bright yellow color rather overwhelming. Still, she thought, with these expensive jewels and fine fabrics, if I sold it, I could pay half a year's rent. The thought made the dress seem much more appealing. For the first time, a sense of ease settled within her. Sienna pushed open the study door. The tutor wasn't there. Instead, she found someone unexpected, young Master Michael. The aristocratic young master, outwardly aloof but secretly clingy, had skipped class, just to catch a glimpse of her. He claimed he was there to make sure she studied diligently. Sienna was speechless. Don't you have your own classes? And no one invited you here. But whatever, she thought, it's not worth arguing. Sienna sat quietly. Michael's gaze was fixed on her. He still tried to sound nonchalant. I heard you got new clothes. You don't look as rustic. This dress is worth half a year's rent. If it still looks rustic, there's a serious problem. Just then, Sienna's tutor entered. Upon learning Michael was there to observe, he immediately began fawning over him. Sienna couldn't quite recall if this was the same tutor who had tormented her in her past life. Still, she politely greeted him. Before the lesson began, the tutor gave them a small test, asking them to write down all the characters they knew. Michael scribbled away furiously. Sienna, however, hesitated. In her past life, she had painstakingly practiced her handwriting to forge letters for Lorena, achieving a flawless script. But now, she was supposed to be a child. If she revealed her true handwriting, it would surely arouse suspicion. She was debating whether to deliberately write poorly. When she realized her current body, unaccustomed to writing, produced a scrawl. Her fingers trembled, the characters wobbly and uneven. Michael, however, leaned over and showered her with praise. Very well written, worthy of a Nate. It was embarrassing to be complimented on her handwriting by a 10-year-old. The tutor, however, seemed impatient. He slapped the paper on the desk and told Sienna to practice diligently. Just then, a man burst into the room. It was Michael's tutor, come to drag him back to his own lessons. Catching Sienna's inquisitive look, Michael stammered, "Don't misunderstand. I'm not here because I'm worried about you or anything." He pointed at Sienna's tutor. "Teach her properly. Don't think you can do as you please just because I'm not here." Without further ado, Michael's tutor grabbed him and left. As soon as they were gone, the previously fawning tutor's expression changed. "A little orphan from nowhere, daring to bother the young master," he muttered. Sienna now remembered. This was the tutor who had bullied her in her past life. He was as vicious as ever, his words dripping with disdain. "Not even worth a worm," he spat. "You should just disappear." But to Sienna, this open malice was preferable to false kindness. Wolves in sheep's clothing are far more suffocating. The tutor reveled in his perceived superiority, sneering at Sienna for being a mongrel orphan. While his words didn't faze her, she refused to endure such personal attacks a second time. The cherished adopted daughter, adored by the entire family, was now being viciously berated by a mere tutor. Her orphan status had become his target, but Sienna, reborn into this life, refused to tolerate it any longer. This man, like me, came from the orphanage. He's amounted to nothing, reduced to teaching orphans like me. He must be consumed by jealousy. As the tutor's tirade continued, Sienna interrupted him. "You keep mentioning orphans. Is it because being an orphan is your weakness?" Her words struck a nerve. Sienna's composure only fueled his rage. He grabbed her roughly, his hand raised to strike. If one blow means a new tutor, it's worth it. "Stop!" A furious roar halted the tutor's action. The Grand Duke stood at the doorway, his brow furrowed, his gaze icy. The tutor shoved Sienna away, scrambling to defend himself. "It's not what it looks like. She insulted me first." The Grand Duke's gaze shifted to Sienna. Sienna's heart lurched. That look, I can't read it. Is he going to misunderstand me again like last time? But she had endured enough false accusations and misjudgments. This couldn't happen again. Sienna stepped forward and gently tugged on the Grand Duke's sleeve, her gaze sincere, pleading, "Please believe me." The Grand Duke was taken aback. She's always avoided me. For her to approach me like this, she must have been deeply wrong. The tutor continued his desperate lies, but the Grand Duke cut him short. Guards seized the man. You dare lay a hand on a daughter of innate family? Prepare to face the consequences. As the tutor was dragged away, Sienna finally released a shaky breath. The Grand Duke looked at the frail girl. He longed to comfort her, but feared frightening her further. I can't rush this, he told himself. I can't make her feel pressured. Rest well, he said gently, then turned to leave. Sienna felt a sense of disbelief. He believed me, without question. Why? But she couldn't allow herself to become complacent. If his kindness ever fades, I'll be plunged into an abyss. There was something she desperately needed to understand. Deborah, she asked, about the pomegranate ritual. Can you tell me more? Was it because of what the guard said? A daughter of innate family? But Deborah was only the head maid. It might be better to ask young Master Michael. As if summoned by her thoughts, Michael burst into the room. The boy who had mocked her in her past life was now her self-proclaimed protector, constantly hovering nearby. Upon hearing of Sienna's mistreatment, he had rushed to her side. Deborah scolded him for forgetting his manners. Michael retreated, then knocked politely before re-entering. Once granted permission, he sheepishly apologized, his indignation on Sienna's behalf evident. He lamented not being there to protect her, his words so earnest they brought Deborah to tears. Sienna, however, felt uneasy. She didn't want to be indebted to Michael, but he had already taken matters into his own hands and had secured the Grand Duke's approval. Sienna was to share lessons with Michael for the time being. This was a disaster. She would be forced to endure daily lessons with someone she'd rather never see again. Misinterpreting her grimace, Michael assumed she was simply shy. He grandly declared she needn't worry about being a burden. He'd pegged Sienna as someone who bottled up her feelings, and he vowed to prevent any further mistreatment. The Grand Duke, he assured her, would choose a new tutor with greater care. You need to prove your worth, Michael encouraged. Show them they can't look down on you just because you're an orphan. Sienna, however, had little interest in proving anything. She wasn't about to build sandcastles on a beach constantly threatened by the tide. One wrong move, and she'd be swept away. Whether or not others looked down on her was irrelevant. Michael couldn't comprehend her indifference, but he couldn't force the issue. He simply led her to their lesson. Michael's tutor, Seth, appeared courteous and affable. Sienna recognized him as the tutor who had retrieved Michael earlier. But now, he wore a gentle, welcoming smile. As Seth prepared to begin the magic lesson, Sienna raised her hand. I can't write yet. Her previous tutor had insisted she needed more practice. To her surprise, Seth dismissed her concern. Such basic skills, he explained, would be covered by another tutor. They would come naturally. Wasting time on it now would be a shame. Michael leaned inconspiratorially. Don't let his gentle demeanor fool you. He'll work you to the bone. Sienna, however, was delighted. She bowed to Seth. Thank you. I'm grateful for a dedicated tutor. This will be invaluable for my future at the military academy. Seth could hardly believe his ears. Could he finally have a model student? On her first day, Sienna's attentiveness and eagerness moved him deeply. After years of teaching, he finally had a model student. Despite her struggles with writing, Sienna diligently took notes. This only fueled Seth's enthusiasm. He lectured on the principles of magic, its stability, and the specialized field of healing magic. He covered half the textbook and assigned homework. When Seth inquired if Sienna found the lesson difficult, she exuded confidence. This further cemented Seth's belief that he had found a truly exceptional student. For Sienna, this was her first formal magic lesson across 2 lifetimes. Unlike her previous life, her magic hadn't been stolen by Lorena. She was finally at the starting line. She would seize this opportunity and rebuild her life. At the Siobhan Military Academy, Assel, the eldest son, stood at the window, gazing outwards. A messenger hawk circled before landing on his arm. He carefully read the letter. He'd been receiving letters from home daily lately. His friend inquired if something was amiss. Assel remained silent, turning to leave. It seemed Assel would be returning home this weekend. Back at the Nate estate, Michael, upon learning Sienna had been diligently working on her homework for 3 days, lamented his own lack of academic talent. Sienna, however, was baffled. Why was he feigning modesty? He would, after all, consistently top their class at the academy, while she struggled to comprehend even the simplest concepts. Despite the difficulty, Sienna found joy in her studies. She relished the solitary struggle, even as her hand grew calloused and sore from writing. Deborah noticed the change in Sienna, from her initial quiet reserved to her newfound enthusiasm for learning. It was heartwarming, yet also a little concerning. She suggested Sienna take a break and stroll in the gardens. Just then, Assel returned. The butler, well aware of the eldest son's recent weekly visits, saw him heading upstairs and offered a gentle warning. If you're going to miss Sienna's room, you might find it empty. She's been diligently studying in the library. Assel realized he hadn't been heading to his own room at all. He'd instinctively been drawn to Sienna. The eldest son, renowned for his rationality and composure, seemed to lose all control when it came to Sienna. From the moment they met, Assel had felt a strange pull towards her. Yet, Sienna's gaze had always been filled with aversion and rejection. This stemmed from memories of her past life, where Assel had carelessly trampled on her affections. Now reborn, she instinctively recoiled from him. Assel, with no memory of his past actions, assumed his brusque demeanor had frightened her. He abandoned the thought of seeing her and turned to leave. The butler, knowing Assel's concern for Sienna, had been tasked with sending daily letters updating him on her well-being. He had even sent flowers when she was ill. If you're truly worried, the butler prompted, why not see her yourself and make sure she's all right? Assel made his way to the library, but Sienna was out for her walk. He surveyed the room, taking in her study environment, relieved to see she wasn't being mistreated. This library held memories for Assel, too. He had studied here as a child. He ran his hand over the familiar desk and chair, seeking a sense of connection. Then, he noticed something beneath the desk. He froze, then stared in disbelief. It was the bouquet of roses he had sent Sienna. He tried to convince himself it was just a meaningless gift, easily forgotten. But why did it sting so much? Deborah, entering the library, gasped at the sight. Before she could explain, Assel turned to leave, murmuring, don't tell Sienna I was here. He glanced back at the withered roses, and a flicker of recognition, a sudden, unsettling déjà vu washed over him. It felt familiar, like a forgotten memory resurfacing. Sienna returned from the gardens to find the servants in a flurry of activity. Michael informed her that the Earl of Virginia had sent a letter. The Earl's daughter, it seemed, intended to challenge for ownership of the Hersaros. Sienna remembered it as a sacred relic used against magical beasts, and her intended means of escape in her past life. Since the Hersaros currently had no owner, any mage could compete for it. In her previous life, the Earl of Virginia had been opportunistic, aligning himself with whoever held power. Why would he suddenly act so out of character? Because there was a variable, and Sienna herself was that variable, capable of altering the past and present. The Countess must have seen the Grand Duke's affection for Sienna, an orphan, and grown jealous. She likely believed her own daughter superior in every way and sought to replace Sienna. It was perfectly in line with the Countess's character. After all, in her past life, he had clashed with Lorena, leading to his own demise. The position of ward in the Grand Duke's household not only signified a lofty status, but, coupled with Assel's eligibility as a suitor, made it a highly coveted prize. While there was no explicit rule stating the ward must marry the eldest son, it was a widely held assumption. Becoming a Nate daughter was practically synonymous with becoming Assel's bride. Assel couldn't help but scoff at the thought. However, according to protocol, he couldn't prevent the Earl's daughter from challenging Sienna. In his heart, Sienna was the only one he could envision as a Nate daughter. Meanwhile, Sienna struggled to reach a book on a high shelf. Since the announcement of the Earl of Virginia's daughter's arrival, the mansion's servants had been consumed with preparations. Even a new maid assigned to her by Deborah was nowhere to be found. With no one to assist her, Sienna decided to manage on her own. After all, she had navigated life alone in her past. But the books were packed tightly, and Sienna lost her balance, tumbling to the floor. After a clatter of falling books, an unsettling silence descended. Had she grown accustomed to the constant attention and care? A surprising pang of loneliness struck her. She forced herself to focus, immersing herself in her magical studies. She knew better than anyone how to distract herself from emotional pain. The mansion's staff, preoccupied with the Earl's daughter, once again neglected Sienna, leaving her unattended. Her stomach rumbling, she was forced to seek sustenance herself. Recalling her past life, she found her way to the kitchen. As she reached for some bread, she was startled by Assel standing in the doorway. Assel was surprised to find her there. Sienna explained her hunger had driven her to the kitchen. "Didn't Deborah provide you with a meal?" he asked. "She's been busy, so another maid was assigned to care for you." "Where is that maid, then? Why are you alone in the kitchen?" A suspicion formed in his mind. Were the maids deliberately mistreating her? The fact she knew the location of the kitchen suggested this wasn't an isolated incident. Assel's anger flared. She had been enduring such neglect. He reached out to comfort her, but Sienna flinched away. In her past life, she had mistakenly believed Assel didn't dislike her. He was cold to everyone, so she had showered him with protective charms, hoping he would at least acknowledge her efforts. But his icy words had shattered her hopes. "Your efforts are meaningless, Sienna." She asked Assel not to reprimand anyone on her behalf, and declined his offer to escort her back to her room. Just then, the butler arrived. Assel instructed him to ensure Sienna was properly cared for and to deal with the negligent servants. Watching her retreating figure, Assel recalled Sienna's gaze. Not just fear, but also wariness and distance. As evening approached, the Earl of Virginia's party finally arrived. Isabel, the Earl's daughter, with her fiery red hair, immediately focused her attention on Assel, making a show of polite gratitude for his acceptance of her sudden request. The Countess chimed in, praising her daughter's perfections. Assel saw through their superficiality. Maintaining his composure, he invited them inside. "Oh my, I'm actually dining at the Nate Mansion. It's like a dream come true." Isabel gushed. Michael found her exuberance irritating. Michael practically rolled his eyes. Both brothers knew their true objective was to usurp Sienna's position as the adopted daughter. Despite this, they were obliged to maintain decorum and play along. As they entered the hall, Assel was surprised to find Sienna already there, dressed elegantly. Abandoning Isabel, Michael darted over to Sienna, disregarding etiquette as he chattered excitedly. Watching their easy familiarity, Assel felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. Had they grown so close already? "This is Sienna, daughter of the Nate family," Assel introduced. Isabel, her eyes narrowed with hostility, assessed Sienna. So this was the rumored orphan, showered with the Nate family's affection. The lowly ward, scorned by everyone in her past life, was now the darling of the entire household. The Nates' lavish affection for Sienna, however, bred resentment. Isabel, the Earl's daughter, yearned to take her place. Seeking to put Sienna on the spot, the Countess inquired about her family name. Aware of the Countess's ill intentions, Sienna calmly replied that, being an orphan, she had no surname. Michael bristled at the woman's deliberate provocation. The Countess, however, smoothly changed the subject, raising her glass to thank Assel for his hospitality. Isabel cast coy glances at Assel, who responded with polite indifference. Meanwhile, Michael attentively described the dishes to Sienna. Observing their closeness, Assel felt a twinge of jealousy, yet also a sense of relief. Sienna's appetite had improved significantly since her arrival, which was a blessing. Isabel, ever the instigator, remarked on Sienna's good fortune, going from an orphan to the Grand Duke's daughter. "Such incredible luck. No one has ever received such an honor," she said, her envy barely concealed. Sienna, long accustomed to such hostility, simply replied, "I am grateful for His Grace's kindness." The room fell silent. Isabel was taken aback. How could this lowly girl possess such composure? Sienna hadn't expected her simple words to have such an effect. Clearly, Isabel was no match for Lorena in terms of cunning and malice. Sienna sighed, a gesture Isabel misinterpreted as mockery. "Such audacity. You think you're so special? I'm the only one worthy of being the Grand Duke's daughter," determined to put Sienna in her place. Isabel challenged Sienna to join her in attempting to awaken her sorrows the following day. The unexpected proposal stunned everyone. Even the Countess was caught off guard. Isabel explained, "Since she's the Grand Duke's chosen daughter, she must be more gifted than I. It wouldn't be fair for me to attempt this alone. Neither of us is likely to succeed," she continued, "but everyone will see how much more capable I am. Let her make a fool of herself in front of everyone." Sienna considered this. Things were getting interesting. Perhaps this was an opportunity to escape her predetermined fate. To secure her position as the favored daughter, Isabel demanded Sienna join her in challenging the Hersuros, hoping to humiliate her and prove her own superiority. Michael was frantic. What if Sienna failed and Isabel succeeded? Isabel would surely claim she was more deserving of being the Nate daughter. What if she demanded Sienna be sent back to the orphanage and she took her place? Then I'll go back to the orphanage, Sienna said nonchalantly. Her indifference exasperated Michael. How can you say that so casually? Michael exclaimed, his voice laced with concern. Do you think we'd abandon you so easily? You're family now. He reminded Sienna that she had already eaten the pomegranate. There was no going back. Apparently, within the Nate estate, only those who were accepted were given a pomegranate, signifying their acceptance into the Nate family. The pomegranate itself was a custom that had evolved into a form of magic. It allowed those not of Nate blood to live safely within the Nate estate, which was protected by powerful wards. Sienna now understood that the pomegranate's magic would cause her to be recognized as a Nate, with no possibility of reversal. Her heart plummeted. This meant she was bound to the Nates for life. Wasn't she utterly trapped? Meanwhile, Isabel paced anxiously in her room, regretting her impulsive challenge. Assel hadn't explicitly agreed that Sienna would participate, and what if Sienna won? The Countess, sensing her daughter's distress, soothed her. Don't worry, darling. You're not like that orphan. You have me. I've already spoken to the head maid, she continued, her voice a low murmur. I'll make sure you become the Grand Duchess. Assel remained troubled by the Hersaro's challenge. The butler reassured him that both young ladies would likely fail and nothing untoward would occur. However, the butler cautioned, there are rare cases where challengers become trapped, unable to break free. Assel worried about this happening to Sienna. What do you think of Sienna's aptitude? He asked. It's impossible to say before her awakening, the butler replied. Only His Grace can truly discern such things. But he's at the front and can't return. What if we simply prevent the challenge from taking place? Assel suggested. The butler shook his head. The Earl wouldn't take that well, he explained, and it would only lead to more gossip and speculation about Sienna. If only he could bear this burden in her place. Driven by his desire to protect Sienna, he resolved to stop her from participating, even if it meant facing disapproval. Just then, Michael burst into the room, pleading for his brother's help. Sienna wants to leave, he cried. Sienna stood behind him, her gaze resolute. Assel, she said, I want to challenge the Hersaros. Assel immediately refused. Challenging the Hersaros is no trivial matter, he explained. It requires training. Sienna looked confused. But I heard it didn't require any training, she said. Assel glared at Seth. You told her that? Seth stepped forward. Every mage has the right to challenge their fate, he argued. Sienna is no exception. Why are you taking her side? Michael demanded, stamping his foot in frustration. Sienna said if Isabel succeeds, she'll return to the orphanage. What? Assel was stunned. Sienna, however, remained calm. Why did she think they would abandon her so readily? Did she feel so insecure in the Nate household? Even if he treated her with the utmost care from now on, he wasn't sure he could erase her distrust. With a sigh, Assel relented. He agreed to let Sienna participate. Finally granted permission, Sienna returned to her room, satisfied, only to find the new maid had prepared a lavish meal, ready to serve her. The sight of the mountains of food overwhelmed her. She turned and fled, hiding behind a tree in the garden. Sienna sighed. Ever since the previous neglectful maid had been dismissed, the new one hovered constantly, trying to feed her every imaginable thing. Just then, she ran into Isabel, who approached her with a sneer. How dare you still wander around this estate so shamelessly? If I were you, I wouldn't even dare show my face, Isabel sneered. But then again, how can I expect an orphan to understand shame? Sienna was baffled. In her past life, the Earl's family hadn't been particularly cruel. Was this deliberate provocation? But her insults lacked bite, harmlessly bouncing off Sienna. Thinking this, a small smile played on Sienna's lips. This infuriated Isabel. How can you, a parasite, still smile? She seethed. The position of Nate's adopted daughter is only for those with talent. Useless trash like you doesn't deserve it. Sienna's eyes widened with mock admiration. I think so too. That's why I support you in taking this position. Isabel, momentarily thrown, responded, You're right. Of course, you should support me. Wait, what did you say? Isabel stared at the girl who was supposed to be her rival. The girl who should have been fighting tooth and nail was offering unconditional support, genuinely hoping she would win. Isabel was dumbfounded. Sienna wasn't playing by the rules. Her fan slipped from her grasp and clattered to the ground. Sienna thoughtfully picked up the fan and, taking Isabel's hand, offered words of encouragement. "Please, you must take my place. I'll support you with all my heart." This completely fried Isabel's circuits. "What is wrong with this girl?" she muttered to herself. Back in her room, Michael informed Sienna that the Grand Duke had returned earlier than expected and would be hosting the Countess and Isabel again. Sienna groaned inwardly. Did she have to endure another one of those excruciatingly awkward gatherings? Determined to avoid it, she began to cough theatrically, feigning illness. She answered Michael's concerned inquiries by claiming she'd caught a chill while walking in the garden. Suddenly, a hand brushed against her forehead. Michael leaned in close, checking for a fever. Startled by the sudden proximity, both froze for a moment. Then Michael smiled. "You must have lost your appetite after dealing with those confrontational guests," he said, his voice gentle. Sienna was surprised. He understood. "I wanted to throw them out," she admitted. "But as a member of the Nate household, I can't act so impulsively." However, he added, a reassuring glint in his eyes, "Father is back. Everything will be over tomorrow." He stroked her hair affectionately. "Good girl," he murmured. Sienna was stunned by the unexpected intimacy, only snapping back to reality after Michael had left. Goosebumps erupted across her skin. What 10-year-old acted like that? The next morning, Sienna awoke to an unsettling silence. On such an important day, why hadn't anyone woken her? She climbed out of bed and tried to open the door, but it was locked. Had she been locked in? Someone was trying to prevent her from participating in the challenge. How utterly predictable. She'd seen this kind of petty tactic countless times in her past life. Sienna climbed back into bed, waiting to see if anyone would come. Soon, she heard Deborah, the headmaid, calling her name. Finally, the door swung open. Deborah looked at Sienna, nestled in her bed, a mixture of worry and exasperation on her face. The young lady was remarkably unconcerned. Locked in her room, and she hadn't even cried for help. She'd simply gone back to sleep. Sienna admitted she hadn't expected anyone to come to her aid. Deborah looked aghast. "Surely you don't think I'd abandon you, that I've been bribed by the Countess?" Sienna didn't answer, urging her to hurry. They were going to be late. Meanwhile, everyone else waited anxiously, their murmurs of complaint growing louder. Michael was worried. Had something happened to Sienna? Only the Countess and Isabel exchanged knowing smiles, their expressions smug. Finally, Sienna and Deborah arrived, faced with the accusatory stares. Deborah immediately knelt and apologized. She explained to the Grand Duke that there was a reason for Sienna's tardiness. "My lady is late because the guests present. Today was the day of the challenge, the day that would determine the ownership of the sacred Hersuros. Yet, the girl who was at the center of it all was inexplicably late." Deborah, the headmaid, bowed low before the Grand Duke. "Your Grace," she began, "I beg your forgiveness. There is a reason for Lady Sienna's tardiness. It has to do with the guests who are present," she trailed off, her words hanging heavy in the air. The Countess shifted uneasily, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. "Guests?" The Countess sputtered, feigning innocence. "Surely you can't mean us? Is this how the Nate household treats its guests?" Deborah calmly continued her explanation. "I've always personally attended to Lady Sienna's needs. However, these past few days, due to the presence of our esteemed guests, other maids were assigned to her care. It seems that an oversight occurred. My lady was not provided with her meals." The Grand Duke's face hardened. The mere suggestion that his beloved daughter had been mistreated ignited a furious fire in his eyes. "They dared to deprive Sienna of food?" he thundered. Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. "To starve such a frail child," someone whispered. Sympathy for Sienna blossomed in the room, directed squarely at the Countess and Isabel. Deborah then dropped the true bombshell. "Furthermore, Your Grace, the reason Lady Sienna is late today is because the newly assigned maid locked her in her room. She confessed that the Countess instructed her to do so," Deborah continued, her voice unwavering, "to prevent Lady Sienna from participating in the challenge. The Countess promised her 100 gold coins upon successful completion of this task." The Countess's carefully constructed facade crumbled. "No, that's not true," she shrieked, her voice laced with desperation. "How could we do such a wicked thing? Do you suggest my headmaid is lying, Countess?" the Grand Duke asked, his voice dangerously low. His icy gaze bore into her, silencing her protests. Just then, the priest officiating the ceremony intervened. "Your Grace," he said, "the challenge cannot be postponed. We must begin the ritual." Assel stepped forward. "This matter will be addressed after the challenge," he stated, his voice carrying an undercurrent of menace. "And if the challenge is unsuccessful, the consequences will be far more severe." "Even if Isabel succeeds and becomes the chosen one," Assel continued, his eyes fixed on the Countess, "the Nate household will still hold you accountable." Isabel, shaken by the Grand Duke's unwavering resolve, began to tremble. The Countess, however, still clung to a sliver of hope. "Isabel," she whispered, her voice tight with urgency, "you must prove yourself. Show them that you are far superior to that orphan. Then everything will be all right." Isabel, desperately trying to convince herself, muttered, "If I can just prove I'm better than that orphan, everyone will forget what I did. They'll see me differently." She approached Sienna, her face contorted in a venomous sneer. "Just you," she hissed, her voice barely a whisper. "You think you're worthy to even stand beside me in this challenge?" Sienna blinked, feigning innocence. "I didn't exactly go to great lengths to be here," she replied mildly. "Weren't you the one so insistent on inviting me?" Isabel's face flushed crimson with rage. A dark, ominous aura flickered in her eyes, startling Sienna. The priest announced the beginning of the challenge, explaining the rules. "The Hersaros will choose its master," he intoned. "If it rejects you, you must accept its decision. If it chooses you, you will be granted the honor of becoming its guardian, a bond that can never be broken." Isabel stepped forward first. Gazing into the purifying waters that held the Hersaros, she hesitated, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. The Countess held her breath, her eyes fixed on her daughter. As Isabel reached out her hand, she was violently repelled by an unseen force. The challenge was over. She had failed. The Countess gasped, disbelief etched on her face. "Let her try again," she demanded. Ignoring the protests, Isabel, driven by desperation, plunged her hand back into the water. This time, the force was even stronger, throwing her to the ground. Mother and daughter stared at each other, their faces ashen. They were utterly defeated. The arrogant interstellar girl's challenge had failed spectacularly, and now she would face the consequences for her cruel treatment of Sienna. It was Sienna's turn. Assel and Michael watched, their hearts pounding in their chests. Sienna took a deep breath and slowly extended her hand into the purifying water. Nothing happened. Silence descended upon the room. It seems, Sienna thought, in my past life, Lorena shattered after touching the Hersaros because she possessed the magical power of two people. But now, there's only me. That must be why nothing's happening. A flicker of disappointment, unexpected and strange, ran through her. So I won't die today after all. She felt a pang of something akin to disappointment. Just as she began to withdraw her hand, a voice whispered in her ear, Don't go." Sienna glanced around, but no one else seemed to react. Did I imagine it? She wondered. I guess I failed the challenge too. What are you talking about? You didn't fail, the voice echoed again. Sienna's eyes widened in realization. Could this be the Hersaros? Yes, the voice confirmed. For 2,000 years, I've been waiting for you, my first master. Sienna abruptly yanked her hand back and turned to leave. She just wanted a simple, uneventful life, not the weighty responsibility of being humanity's guardian. Feigning a sudden pain in her hand, Sienna declared, I failed. The Hersaros, however, wasn't about to let her go that easily. The gem, previously resting placidly in the water, suddenly leaped into the air. Surrounded by a magnificent, swirling flame, it roared at Sienna, I told you not to go. An immense, purifying fire erupted, engulfing the area in a blazing inferno. The onlookers gasped, frozen in shock. Assel and Michael surged forward to rescue Sienna, but the Grand Duke held them back. Wait, he commanded. The flames licked closer to Sienna, gradually enveloping her. Yet, Sienna felt no heat. The raging inferno shrunk, condensing into a small, flickering flame. It was the Hersaros. Sienna, still attempting to extricate herself, said, I never agreed to be your master. Huh, did you think I was asking for your permission? The Hersaros retorted. I'm not the first named you've met. Don't tell me you're comparing me to other names. I haven't met any other names, Sienna replied, confused. But I'm sure I saw that scar. Then why don't you want to form a contract with me? The Hersaros demanded. Because I don't want to be your master. Obviously, Sienna started to explain, but her vision blurred. She lost consciousness and collapsed. A sacred relic, coveted by many, was actively being avoided by the girl it had chosen. All she wanted was an ordinary life, But in this tug-of-war with her sorrows, she had fainted. It was then that Sienna instinctively performed her first act of magic, her awakening. The scale and nature of this first spell would determine her future magical abilities. Sienna's awakening was evolution. It was clear she was destined to become a powerful healer. Congratulations poured in for the Grand Duke. Healers were incredibly rare and valuable, capable of purging mages of corrupting influences. Even more astonishing, Sienna had inadvertently dispelled the ancient, lingering evil that had plagued the Nate estate for generations. Something no other healer had ever accomplished. Her power of evolution also brought forth a surge of life force, summoning an early spring amidst the harsh winter, blanketing the estate in unexpected warmth and blossoms. It was a truly unforgettable sight. So that Sienna could rest, the Grand Duke dismissed everyone and ordered preparations for the Countess and Isabel's trial. Once everyone had left, the Grand Duke gently nudged Sienna awake. Sienna, with her introverted nature, had simply pretended to be unconscious, overwhelmed by the large crowd. The Grand Duke, understanding her discomfort, waited until they were alone. Sienna groaned. "I'm doomed." Doomed? That's a bit dramatic, isn't it? Her sorrows, now a small flame, popped out, stretching its miniature limbs. Finally, it exclaimed, "I don't have to pretend to be a necklace anymore." Sienna was utterly dejected. A name knocks you unconscious and then unilaterally forms a contract? That's practically coercion. Her sorrows, now a tiny, flickering flame, enlightened her. Placing your hand in the purifying water is an ancient custom for requesting a contract, it explained. And since you performed the ritual, it continued, a hint of smugness in its voice. That means you made the request. I simply agreed. It was a fair, just, and public ceremony. It was clear that her sorrows wasn't going to back down. Knowing further argument was futile, Sienna changed tack. "What do you mean by evolved the Nate fortune?" she asked. The little flame preened. "That's my gift to you." Surprise. Aren't you impressed? "I cast such powerful magic that no one will dare underestimate you now." Sienna groaned inwardly. She didn't want to be noticed. Even with this newfound power, she craved a quiet, simple life, far from the spotlight. Her sorrows' flame dimmed. Are you trying to abandon me? Don't even dream of it. We're bound by an eternal contract." Its voice quivered with a childish, wrong tone. "I did it for your own good. You didn't even realize someone so close to you was being invaded by malevolent energy." Suddenly, it clicked for Sienna. The Countess and Isabel's drastic change in personality, their increasingly cruel actions, it was all connected to that dark energy. At that very moment, the Countess and Isabel knelt on the floor, trembling. They couldn't comprehend how they could have committed such harmful acts. The Grand Duke, his face impassive, looked down at them. The once arrogant Countess and her daughter, now stripped of their haughty demeanor, shook with fear. They had dared to harm the Grand Duke's beloved adopted daughter, and now they faced his judgment. The Countess racked her brain, desperately trying to understand why she had ever entertained such malicious thoughts. How could I have been so foolish? But the moment they saw the Hersoroses spark, a wave of clarity washed over them. Something was wrong with us, they realized. Something unnatural. But the damage was done. The Grand Duke had every right to sentence them to death. Explanations seemed pointless. "It was all me," the Countess pleaded with the Grand Duke. "Isabel knew nothing. Please, spare her life," she begged. But the Grand Duke remained unmoved. He intended to make an example of them, to show that the Nate family would not tolerate treachery. The cold steel of his blade reflected the Countess's despairing face. "Stop." Sienna rushed into the room. Assel stared at her in astonishment. "How did Lady Sienna get here?" he demanded of the guards. "You should have stopped her." "I came on my own accord," Sienna explained. "Please don't reprimand them." Assel fell silent. The onlookers murmured amongst themselves. The master of the Hersaros commands even the first young master. The Grand Duke lowered his sword, his icy gaze shifting to Sienna. The look sent a shiver down her spine, a chilling echo of her past life. She remembered Lorena, her manipulative sister, falsely accusing her of using dark magic. No matter how much she protested, the Grand Duke had imprisoned her. The Grand Duke's gentle voice broke through her memories. "Sienna, what is it?" Sienna forced herself to focus. "The Hersaros told me. The Countess and Isabel were influenced by a malevolent energy. That's why they acted as they did. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. That explains their strange behavior. If Sienna hadn't evolved, they might have become completely consumed by it. The Hersaroza's words carry a lot of weight. Assel stepped forward. Sienna, he asked, why are you defending them? The adopted daughter of a noble family had nearly been murdered. Yet at the crucial moment, she intervened, halting the execution of the perpetrators. Assel couldn't understand. Even if the Countess and Isabel were influenced by malevolent energy, he pressed, they still posed a threat to you. Why would you save them? I'm not saving them, Sienna replied calmly. I don't have that power. I simply felt it was wrong to conceal the truth. As for their punishment, she continued, her gaze meeting the Grand Duke's. That isn't for an orphan like me to decide. It's your decision, Grand Duke. The Grand Duke, his expression unreadable, pondered her words. After a moment of heavy silence, he delivered his judgment. He granted Sienna half the shares of the Countess's vast mining operation as compensation. Beyond that, the Countess was only required to pay a fine. It was a lenient sentence, and the Countess's family was deeply grateful for Sienna's intervention. Isabel, in particular, felt indebted to Sienna, vowing to repay her kindness. Sienna stared at the share contract, utterly bewildered. She learned then that the mine wasn't just a source of ordinary gemstones. It also produced essence gems, capable of holding magical spells. These gems could be inscribed with purification spells and worn as powerful amulets. Their rarity made them incredibly valuable beyond price. Sienna hesitated. The gift was far too extravagant. Moreover, in her past life, this very mine had been forfeited by Isabel to Lorena after losing a power struggle. Accepting such a significant asset now felt dangerous. It could have unforeseen consequences. Assel urged her to accept. These are essential for a mage who commands a named, he explained. Couldn't the Grand Duke or the first young master accept it on my behalf? Sienna suggested. At that moment, the Grand Duke rose to his feet. He looked at Sienna, his expression serious. You are no longer an orphan, he stated, his voice resonating with authority. As the master of the Hersaros, you must understand that with great privilege comes great responsibility. His words weighed heavily on Sienna. However, Sienna, the Grand Duke continued, surprising her with his next words, if, even with all this, you still wish to relinquish that responsibility, you may. You are free to live as you choose, he declared. You needn't concern yourself with the opinions of others. The freedom Nate promises you, not even I can infringe upon. So, from now on, he concluded, his voice softening slightly, do not refer to yourself as an orphan. Nate will always stand behind you. Sienna was stunned. She couldn't believe the Grand Duke had said such things. Both he and Assel looked at her with genuine sincerity, and was that a flicker of pity in their eyes? A wave of disorientation washed over Sienna. The events of her past life hadn't happened in this one. It was as if she alone was trapped by those memories. Could she truly forget that agonizing pain? Could she simply start over? No, not without an apology, not without repentance. She couldn't forgive so easily. She would rather carry the weight of those memories for the rest of her life. While the Countess's family had made amends, the matter wasn't closed. Deborah had discovered a vial of potent poison capable of temporarily neutralizing magic. Its origins were unknown. The source of the malevolent energy that had afflicted the Countess and Isabel was also a mystery. A thorough investigation was necessary. Late that night, Michael found himself in a familiar room. Before him, a grown man paced anxiously, muttering curses under his breath. So arrogant. I can't stand the sight of him. I don't understand why father brought that child into the house. Michael sat frozen in his chair, unable to move. Who was he talking about? He wondered. The man turned, and Michael gasped. It was himself. The boy jolted awake, heart pounding. He had just dreamt of his future self. Cold sweat slicked his skin. Who was that person I loathed so much in my dream? He wondered. And who was that girl, the one I glimpsed for just a moment? Seth congratulated Sienna on becoming a healer and thanked her for bringing early spring to the estate. Although he hadn't witnessed the event himself, he was overjoyed to receive the blessing. Seth watched Sienna with a mixture of pride and relief. He also silently admired the Grand Duke's foresight. Previously, there had been suggestions to hold a celebratory banquet and publicly announce Sienna's status as a healer. But the Grand Duke had chosen to keep it a secret, citing Sienna's unfamiliarity with her new life as a Nate and forbidding any outsiders from contacting her directly. This caused quite a stir among the nobles who had hoped to ingratiate themselves with the newly powerful healer. The Grand Duke's obvious favoritism towards Sienna left them scrambling. How were they supposed to curry favor now? However, they were nothing if not resourceful. Mountains of toys, encrusted with jewels and gold, along with stacks of books, began arriving at the estate, all gifts for Sienna. The Grand Duke, however, ordered them all returned. At the time, Seth hadn't understood, but now, seeing the genuine joy on Sienna's face, he realized the Grand Duke's wisdom. Becoming a healer meant Sienna would be obligated to attend the military academy at the age of 14. With this in mind, Seth had begun Sienna's basic education, something she had been eagerly anticipating. She was practically vibrating with excitement, poised with her notebook and quill, ready to take copious notes. Seth explained various aspects of being a healer, and seeing her attentiveness, decided against assigning homework for the day. To his surprise, Sienna looked disappointed. "But I enjoy homework," she admitted shyly. Seth blinked. This was the first time a student had ever uttered those words to him. His long and arduous teaching career had begun after a regrettable incident where the first young master, Assel, had caught him in a compromising position, forcing him to tutor the younger Michael. Until now, his teaching life had been a bleak and wearying affair. Finally, a ray of sunshine had pierced the gloom. The studious, angelic Miss Sienna. One was touched by the student's diligence, the other captivated by the teacher's engaging and humorous style. It was a harmonious student-teacher relationship, a heartwarming sight to behold. "Go ahead, Miss Sienna," Seth encouraged, a twinkle in his eye. "What kind of homework would you like?" "As long as it's assigned by me," he added with a grin. "Any homework is acceptable." Michael entered the room at that precise moment, taking in the scene. "Are you two mad?" he asked incredulously. "Should we call a doctor?" Deborah chuckled. "They're just passionate about learning," she explained. "Though," she added, glancing at Sienna, "this is the first time I've seen Sienna so genuinely happy." At dinner, Sienna's academic enthusiasm seemed to have waned, replaced by a noticeable drowsiness. Michael nudged her playfully, telling her to wake up and finish her meal so they could go out. The mention of an outing instantly revived Sienna. "Let's go to the market district," Michael suggested. In her past life, the orphanage director had forbidden outings, fearing the children would cause trouble. And during her time at the Nate estate, she had only ventured out a few times, always accompanied by Lorena, and only during holidays. Looking at Michael's sly smile, Sienna had the distinct feeling that agreeing to go out with him would somehow feel like losing. Gazing at Sienna's innocent face, a flicker of recognition sparked in Michael's mind. The image of a girl lying still and lifeless resurfaced in his memory. A girl wrongly accused, framed by her cruel older sister, dying unjustly. She had thought death would be a release from a life where she felt unloved and unwanted. Yet, reborn, she found herself unexpectedly cherished by an entire family. Everything she had yearned for in her past life was now freely offered, yet Sienna hesitated. She didn't want it. Haunted by her tragic past, she only desired a peaceful, uneventful life. But fate had other plans. She had become the master of the sacred her sorrows, a healer with magical powers. Burdened with this responsibility, she yearned for strength, throwing herself into her studies. Seeing her exhaustion, Michael decided to take her out for some fresh air and distraction. It was Sienna's first time experiencing the bustling city in both her lives. Sienna's eyes widened with delight as she took in the vibrant market scene. Michael enthusiastically pointed out various sights, and passers-by, recognizing the Grand Duke's carriage, bowed and offered greetings to Michael. When they saw Michael helping Sienna out of the carriage, the onlookers whispered amongst themselves, speculating whether this was the Nate family's adopted daughter they'd heard so much about. Everything was a marvel to Sienna, experiencing the bustling market for the first time. Michael, ever attentive, indulged her curiosity, buying her treats and drinks. "See, just strolling around is fun, isn't it?" he asked. "It is," Sienna agreed, a rare smile gracing her lips. It was a moment of genuine relaxation, a precious reprieve from the weight of her new life. Her gaze then landed on a pair of red leather shoes displayed in a shop window. Michael, following her line of sight, didn't hesitate. I'll buy them for you, he declared, immediately calling for the shopkeeper to bring Sienna's size. And just like that, Sienna found herself ushered into a chair, a servant kneeling before her, gently slipping the shoes on her feet. She glanced at Michael and the butler, both beaming and giving her enthusiastic thumbs up. I just looked at them, she thought, bewildered. They're being awfully enthusiastic. Sienna shifted her feet, a little embarrassed by the attention. My goodness, the shopkeeper exclaimed. They fit perfectly, as if they were made for you, miss. Michael immediately told the shopkeeper to wrap them up. Sienna opened her mouth to protest, but Michael stopped her with a sincere look. Please accept them. I truly want you to have them. Their next stop was a toy shop. While cute panda plushies abounded, Sienna's attention was captured by a miniature model of a mobile home. Its exterior was simple and unassuming, but the interior, visible through tiny windows, was exquisitely detailed, complete with a living room, kitchen, and bedroom. So this is what a home is supposed to look like, Sienna mused. Both the orphanage and the Nate estate, while providing shelter, had never felt like home. She gazed at the model, a wistful longing in her eyes. Would she ever have a place like that to call her own? Suddenly, her sorrows appeared, flitting around the miniature house, seemingly inspecting it with great interest. I adore this little house, the wisp declared. It perfectly suits my elegant sensibilities. Upon hearing her sorrows' enthusiastic approval, Michael, once again, promptly purchased the model. Sienna, puzzled, wondered aloud. Does a little flame like you even need a house? Not to live in, her sorrows replied, but to simply possess. Just as you, Sienna, wish for a home that is more than just a place to reside. Sienna was taken aback. After a flurry of activity, her sorrows clapped its tiny hands, inviting Sienna to step inside the miniature house. Before Sienna could react, a powerful force pulled her into the model. Welcome to my home, a voice echoed. Sienna's eyes widened as she stared at the unfamiliar red-haired man standing before her. Are you? Her sorrows, she stammered. The cute little flame had transformed into a strikingly handsome man with fiery red hair. Sienna instantly recognized him as the sacred artifact, her sorrows. You're quick on the uptake, I'll give you that, her sorrows said with a smirk. Sienna looked around, noticing the space resembled the miniature house, but realized her sorrows had used magic to expand the space within, creating a tangible home from the model. Then why did you need me to buy the model? Sienna asked, confused. Because you destroyed my house, her sorrows exclaimed dramatically. I needed a new residence. Sienna was speechless. He had destroyed the necklace himself. Her sorrows chuckled, his eyes twinkling. If you hadn't left without permission, I wouldn't have needed to break that gem, now would I? Sienna was about to argue, but her sorrows turned serious. Do you know you're a child of evolution? He asked. You mean a healer? Sienna replied. Yes, her sorrows continued. But do you realize you've been evolving this estate without even awakening your domain? Sienna stared at him, bewildered. Her sorrows explained that a child of evolution with her level of power could unconsciously evolve their surroundings as naturally as breathing. Suddenly, Sienna's constant drowsiness since arriving at the Grand Duke's estate made sense. It was the result of her unintentional, continuous evolution. However, her sorrows added, his voice grave, this estate has been steeped in a malevolent energy for far too long. Sienna's power isn't enough to fully purify this place. Her sorrows continued. The fact that she collapsed after the last cleansing is proof her body can't handle it. So I have to leave? Sienna asked, a flicker of fear in her eyes. It's not that simple, her sorrows replied. This is already your domain. Her sorrows inquired whether Sienna had been born at the estate. Her negative response puzzled him. The connection you have to this place is incredibly strong, he mused, as if you lived and died here for a decade. Are you worried about me? Sienna asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. Of course, I'm worried about you, her sorrows exclaimed. He suddenly leaned closer, his fiery eyes intense. You're the only master I've chosen in 2,000 years. I just didn't expect you to be so dense. To prevent my clumsy, yet adorable little master from dying due to evolution, her sorrows declared, taking Sienna's hand in his. I have a lot to do. Sienna, you're my master. I can see what you see, he explained, but you haven't fully awakened yet. Remember, I can only grow if you grow, her sorrows reminded her. But for now, the priority is finding me a new house. Something like a pure energy crystal, he added. As his words faded, Sienna felt her vision blurring, the world around her growing dark. Then, everything went black. She drifted into a deep sleep. The next morning, the maids came to wake Sienna. The moment they pulled back the covers, their eyes widened in shock. A piercing scream echoed through the grand mansion. Jolted awake, Sienna felt disoriented and different. Her hands, they were short and chubby. Deborah, scolding the startled maid, entered the room. She froze, her eyes fixed on Sienna. Sienna had become much smaller. Wide-eyed and bewildered, Sienna looked back at her. "Goodness, how adorable!" Deborah exclaimed, recovering from her initial shock. After her initial astonishment, Deborah checked Sienna over. She seemed perfectly healthy, showing no signs of discomfort. Unsure what to do, Deborah decided to summon the Grand Duke and a physician. Sienna sighed, rubbing her forehead. What in the world had happened? "I apologize. It's probably my fault," a small voice chirped. Her sorrows, in his flame form, peeked out timidly. He explained that Sienna's transformation was likely due to his continued attachment to her after the gem's destruction. Sienna fumed, wanting nothing more than to swat the troublesome little flame. Her sorrows flitted above her head, urging her to find him a new house, quickly, so she could return to normal. The young woman had woken up as a toddler. The Grand Duke stared at the child version of Sienna, utterly dumbfounded. "What in the world happened?" he asked, bewildered. After a thorough examination, the physician concluded that Sienna was physically healthy. He theorized that the recent tumultuous events, the contract with a sacred artifact, the awakening of her evolution, had disrupted the balance of magic within her, leading to this transformation. He reassured them that it was likely temporary, estimating she would return to her normal form within 2 weeks. The thought of remaining like this for 2 weeks filled Sienna with despair. She began to complain to the Grand Duke, completely oblivious to how utterly adorable she was in her current state. Every little movement, every lisp, elicited squeals of delight from the maids. Looking at Sienna, now the size of a 3 or 4-year-old, her speech reduced to an adorable babble. Even a Grand Duke couldn't resist the urge to reach out and poke her chubby cheek. Sienna explained that her sorrows was responsible for her transformation. She then remembered the new house her sorrows needed. It must be an essence gem, she realized. Essence gems were the power source for magical artifacts and tools for spellcasting. Due to their limited availability, they were incredibly expensive. Sienna recalled the mine the Countess and Isabel had forfeited as compensation. That mine produced essence gems. She brought this up to the Grand Duke, who then suggested they move to a quieter location to discuss the matter further. Sienna clambered down from the bed, her tiny form eliciting another chorus of oohs and ahs from the maids. The Grand Duke strode ahead, Sienna struggling to keep up. Her long gown, now far too big, hampered her tiny legs, leaving her panting in his wake. The butler discreetly coughed, drawing the Grand Duke's attention to the small child trailing behind him. "Your Grace, I apologize. Please, go ahead. I'll catch up," Sienna huffed, surprised when the man stopped and turned back towards her. She worried he was annoyed, just as he reached down as if to pick her up. Deborah appeared. "I'm so sorry to take up your time, Your Grace," she said smoothly, scooping Sienna into her arms. "Don't worry, I'll carry the young miss." A flicker of awkwardness crossed the Grand Duke's face. He stiffly withdrew his hand and turned away. Sienna watched him go, puzzled. He looks a little sad, she thought. Did my eyes get worse when I became smaller? She wondered. The butler sighed internally. He's a father of 2, yet he's still so awkward with children, he mused. After Sienna explained her Soros's needs, the Grand Duke gestured, and a servant presented a small bag. Inside, it overflowed with essence gems. Sienna gasped. A single gem, the size of a coin, could buy a house in the capital. How much is all of this worth? She wondered aloud. Even though you now own shares in the mine, you won't receive the gems immediately. So, take these for now. When a sacred artifact is attached to a gem, it becomes a soul stone, the Grand Duke explained. A named weapon is simply a weapon embedded with a soul stone. So, besides the gem, her sorrows also needs a weapon. Staring at the glittering pile, Sienna ventured, I can just choose one from here, right? The Grand Duke's expression shifted. What do you mean by that? He asked. Sienna was confused. Wasn't he offering me one? She thought. Does he want me to pay? Clutching the priceless gems, she asked the Grand Duke if he could gift her one. His expression changed again. What do you mean one? One isn't enough. Take the whole bag, he declared. Sienna breathed a sigh of relief. Surely, I don't need this many, she thought. You never know. "It's best to be prepared," the Grand Duke replied. Sienna was stunned by his generosity. To give away such precious gems so readily. The Nate family truly lived up to their reputation as founding heroes. As one of the 3 guardian families of the empire, their accumulated wealth was enough to last generations. The Grand Duke invited Sienna to visit the treasury once she returned to her normal form, to choose a treasure worthy of holding an essence gem. Sienna's first instinct was to refuse, but then she remembered her ongoing purification efforts for the Grand Duchess. "I might as well accept everything they offer," she reasoned. "I'll need money if I want to live independently someday. Why make things difficult for myself? I'll just take it all." Observing Sienna's lack of protest, the Grand Duke sensed a change in her. She usually seemed so reserved and serious. Is it because she's younger now? He wondered. She seemed so innocently sweet. He felt a newfound closeness to her. The weekend arrived, and Assel returned from the military academy. The Grand Duke found it remarkable that his son had come home 3 weeks in a row. Everyone knew the reason for Assel's frequent visits. A servant helpfully informed him. "Miss Sienna is currently studying in a library." Assel paused, clearing his throat to mask his sudden nervousness. "Did he just panic?" Another servant whispered. "I'm not sure, but I know he's going to see Miss Sienna." Assel reached the library door, and the memory of the wilted rose beneath the desk pricked at him. The rose he had given Sienna, would it still be discarded there? He wondered. But the library was empty. Sienna wasn't there. A maid informed Assel that Sienna had just returned to her room. His gaze, however, was drawn to a bouquet of flowers by the window. The maid explained that they were a gift from Seth, Sienna's tutor, to celebrate the start of her education. Sienna had placed them in a vase herself. The stark contrast in how his gift had been treated left Assel with a bitter taste in his mouth. Late that night, Assel was plagued by a strange dream. He found himself frantically searching his desk. "Where is it? I have to find it. It should have been in plain sight. Where could it have gone?" He was searching for the amulet Sienna had given him. He ransacked his room, but the amulet was nowhere to be found. Sienna's image began to flicker before his eyes. He saw her bright, sunny smile, and then a still, lifeless form. A pang of guilt shot through him. He felt as if he had lost something irreplaceable. Assel jolted awake, drenched in sweat. Overwhelmed with emotion, he wept. He had dreamt he'd carelessly discarded Sienna's heartfelt gift. It was as if he had destroyed something precious with his own hands. Despair washed over him. It was the worst nightmare he'd ever had. What was this agonizing feeling? Sienna stared at her reflection. Even though it had been several days since her transformation, she still wasn't used to seeing a toddler staring back. Deborah, watching her, was utterly charmed. Sienna, dressed in one of the young master's old outfits, looked ridiculously cute. Deborah couldn't resist reaching out to hug her. Sienna sighed inwardly. The maids were treating her like a baby. They insisted on carrying her everywhere. It was all because she tripped in front of Michael yesterday. The memory of Michael's reaction made her cringe. Her speech was still a little slurred, and her cheeks were undeniably chubby. Michael had burst out laughing the moment he saw her. Mortified, Sienna had turned to walk away, but hadn't been watching where she was going. She'd tumbled to the ground in front of everyone. How embarrassing. Even her fall, however, had somehow managed to look adorable. Michael had soothed her, telling her not to cry and praising her like a good little girl. This was ridiculous. "Stop treating me like a child," she wanted to yell. At the dinner table, Sienna concentrated on speaking clearly. Michael, meanwhile, gave her a thumbs up, praising her for being such a good girl today. Assel, seeing Sienna in her toddler form for the first time, looked surprised. Sienna tried to greet Assel politely, but her slurred speech turned young master into something closer to young master. Watching Michael dissolve into laughter, Sienna, for the first time, had the urge to punch him. Thankfully, the Grand Duke intervened. Michael urged everyone to begin their meal. A moment later, Michael nudged Sienna and subtly gestured towards the butler's feet. He was wearing the comical shoes when they'd been shopping after buying Sienna her red leather shoes. Michael had also bought a pair of outrageously silly shoes, declaring they were for the butler. Sienna hadn't expected the normally stern butler to actually wear them. The contrast was too much. A giggle escaped Sienna's lips. The Grand Duke and Assel exchanged surprised glances. Michael had actually made Sienna laugh. And not just a small chuckle, but a genuine giggle. It was unprecedented. How had he managed it? Michael, playing it cool, declared it a trade secret. The Grand Duke, barely containing his curiosity, looked at Michael expectantly, hoping for a hint. Father, you're dying to know, aren't you? But it's a secret between Sienna and me. Assel seethed with jealousy, but there was nothing he could do. Assel could only vent his frustration on the steak before him. The clatter of his cutlery against the plate was loud enough to make even Sienna look up in surprise. Was this truly the usually composed and elegant young master? Meanwhile, the Grand Duke, lost in thought, knocked over his glass, spilling wine all over himself. Only Michael seemed to be enjoying the situation, stifling laughter behind his hand. Sienna couldn't understand what was going on with these three. Oh well, she thought, it's none of my business. Best to focus on eating. The girl was exceptionally gifted. At such a young age, she had become the master of the sacred relic, her sorrows. The Grand Duke was planning to hold a formal gathering in a week to publicly announce Sienna's status. But Sienna was apprehensive. If her identity became public knowledge, then Lorena, her sister from her past life, would surely find out. Even though Lorena wasn't here in this life, her cruel words still echoed in Sienna's mind. You don't deserve any of this, Sienna. In her previous life, Sienna had lived under Lorena's manipulative control. A few sweet words had been enough to ruin her entire existence. Thinking back on it now filled Sienna with shame. In this life, she vowed not to trust anyone, not to love anyone. A week later, the gathering was held as planned. Unfortunately, Sienna was still trapped in her toddler form. The thought of appearing before everyone like this filled her with dread. People would undoubtedly judge her. Seeing Sienna's anxiety, the maids tried to cheer her up. They presented her with handmade tokens of support. Don't worry, miss, they reassured her. Your cuteness can conquer anything. Sienna was touched by their gesture. If anyone bullies you, just tell the Grand Duke and he'll deal with them. And young Master Michael, he'll definitely make sure anyone who bullies you regrets it. And the amazing young Master Assel will show them what true elegance is. Inside the ballroom, guests mingled and danced. The atmosphere was far more relaxed than Sienna had anticipated. His Grace has gone to great lengths for your debut, Miss Sienna, Deborah remarked. But Sienna couldn't bring herself to feel excited. Large crowds made her uncomfortable. The Grand Duke arrived, dressed in formal attire. He was momentarily stunned by Sienna's appearance. The words, "You look absolutely adorable today," were on the tip of his tongue, but he caught himself and instead said, "Your dress is very beautiful." The old butler smiled knowingly, while Deborah tried to break the awkward silence. The Grand Duke, his face flushed, knelt down to pick up Sienna. He was clearly still unsure how to interact with his daughter. Sienna willingly reached out to him. Everything was ready. Grand Duke Nate and Miss Sienna, the announcer declared. The guests turned to watch as the Grand Duke entered the ballroom, Sienna in his arms. Murmurs of admiration rippled through the crowd. Sienna was indeed as remarkable as the rumors suggested. To be the master of her sorrows at such a young age was truly exceptional. Sienna, however, was incredibly nervous. Michael stepped forward to greet her. Their interaction sparked further whispers. Isn't young Master Michael usually so aloof? They seem rather close. Then Assel extended his hand and helped Sienna into a chair. The actions of the three men served to demonstrate Sienna's importance within the Nate family. The Grand Duke formally introduced Sienna as his adopted daughter, and the master of the sacred relic, her sorrows. A lowborn orphan, now elevated to the esteemed position of the Grand Duke's daughter, and chosen as the master of her sorrows, no less. The guests were astonished. They offered their congratulations to the Grand Duke and praised Sienna. Sienna, however, felt uncomfortable amidst the celebratory atmosphere. Having lived through a previous life, she knew all too well that behind the smiles and compliments lurked scorn, disdain, and mockery. A mere orphan daring to sit in that position. How shameless. Michael called out to Sienna, who was lost in thought. With an air of playful mystery, he led her away. Sienna gasped. Before her stood a mountain of gifts. These were all congratulatory presents for her. This, Michael explained, was the treatment befitting a child of the Nate family. He urged her to choose one to open. Sienna hesitated. I'll choose this small one, she said, pointing to a modestly sized package. You should pick the biggest one, Michael exclaimed. He scooped Sienna up and placed her in the embrace of an enormous teddy bear. Goodness, Sienna, it's perfect for you, he declared. Who could have sent such a tasteful gift? His exaggerated wink made it clear it was from him. Suddenly, Michael took Sienna's hand and kissed it. Congratulations, Princess of Nate, he murmured. The gesture sparked a wave of jealous glares from a group of nearby girls, while Michael simply grinned, seemingly oblivious. Sienna sighed inwardly. She had a feeling this was going to cause trouble. The next day, in the Grand Duke's garden, Sienna felt awkward as she watched the small groups of guests mingling. The Grand Duke and the others were attending a meeting, and Deborah had insisted Sienna stay and entertain the visitors. As a member of the Nate family, she had to make an appearance, but no one seemed to pay her any attention. She wished her sorrows could talk to her right now. Just then, a fan fluttered to the ground at her feet. Oh dear, I dropped my fan. Miss Sienna, could you please pick it up for me? It was one of the girls who had glared at her the previous day, the one with green hair. She approached Sienna with an aggressive air, clearly looking for a confrontation. Miss Sienna, we're asking you for a favor, she said pointedly. You hear us, and yet you don't move. How rude. Sienna remembered how, in her past life, her sister, Lorena, always struck first when faced with jealousy and hostility. Fine, Sienna thought. I'll use my own power to fight back. With a subtle flick of her wrist, the fan on the ground twitched, then lifted into the air, flying straight towards the green-haired girl. The girl, caught off guard, stumbled and fell. I'll pick it up for you, Sienna said sweetly. Is that better? The green-haired girl was furious. You orphan, how dare you treat me like this? Other women, who had been watching the scene unfold, rushed over, immediately accusing Sienna of being arrogant and unruly. Barely innate and already acting like this, bullying the children of loyal families. His Grace will be so disappointed in you. Sienna remained silent. She hadn't realized the animosity towards her extended beyond the children. Even these adults held her in contempt. Orphans truly have no manners, one woman sneered. She probably thinks she's about to become the Grand Duchess, so she can look down on everyone. Faced with their accusations and insults, Sienna didn't bother explaining. It wouldn't make a difference. No one would take her side. Is something the matter? A voice suddenly interrupted the commotion. A white-haired man appeared. Sienna recognized him. He was someone who had helped Lorena in her past life. Jealous of the girl's charm, a group of mean girls deliberately made things difficult for Sienna. At a critical moment, a white-haired older gentleman came to her rescue. Sienna recognized him. In her past life, this Viscount Jest had strongly supported her sister Lorena, advocating for her to become the future Grand Duchess. Why was he helping her this time around? With a few well-chosen words, Viscount Jest dispersed the crowd. Thank you for helping me, Sienna said. You're welcome. If anything like this happens again, don't hesitate to come to me, Jest replied with a kind smile. He even invited Sienna to join him for a walk. Sienna felt a sense of unease. She sensed a dark aura emanating from him. In the next moment, Jess dropped his friendly facade and, brandishing a dagger, forced Sienna to go with him. Just then, the sky opened and heavy rain began to fall. Jess shoved open the door of a dilapidated building and roughly pushed Sienna inside. Get upstairs, he barked. Sienna stumbled, the impact jarring loose one of the essence gems from her pocket. A wave of anxiety washed over her. Her sorrows had been uncharacteristically silent all day. Could she escape this predicament alone? She was led to a small room. The moment the door creaked open, a putrid stench assaulted her nostrils. Jess' face was twisted into a grotesque smile. He flung Sienna into the center of the room. Sienna's eyes widened in horror. On the floor, a magic circle was drawn in what looked disturbingly like blood. Jess caressed the coffin, murmuring, "My angel, I will bring you back." The gruesome scene sent chills down Sienna's spine. Jess revealed his twisted plan. He intended to feed Sienna's blood to his daughter, believing it would transfer Sienna's magical power and resurrect her. Sienna was stunned. Transferring magic was never that simple. If drinking blood were enough, Lorena wouldn't have resorted to such elaborate measures to steal her power in her past life. Jest brandished his dagger, threatening Sienna's life if she didn't cooperate. Looking at the man's crazed expression, Sienna knew that even if she obeyed, she would likely be killed. Taking the initiative might be her only chance. With a sudden surge of defiance, she bit down hard on Jess' hand. Jess yelped in pain, shoving her aside. "You little brat, how dare you bite me? I'll drain every drop of blood from your body." "Now," Sienna cried out, summoning her sorrows. Instantly, flames erupted around her, engulfing Jest. The man screamed in agony as he thrashed within the inferno. At that moment, Sienna's body began to change. In the blink of an eye, she was back in her teenage form. Run! Her sorrows urged. Jest, consumed by a dark aura, was mutating within the flames. Her sorrows, without a physical form, couldn't hold him back. The exit was blocked. Sienna looked at the window behind her. Did she have to jump? Jest was closing in. Desperately searching for an escape, Sienna suddenly heard a familiar, urgent voice. She looked out the window. In the distance, astride a horse bow drawn, was Assel. Just as her life hung in the balance, Assel made his dramatic entrance. He spurred his horse forward, his longbow taut. An arrow, wreathed in blue flames, shot through the air like a bolt of lightning. It whizzed past Sienna, striking the monstrous Jest. Horrifyingly, the wound began to regenerate. The dark magic was too potent. They had to get out. Sienna glanced at the window. Assel was waiting below. Jump, Sienna. I'll catch you. With no time to hesitate, she leaped from the window, landing safely in Assel's arms. Sienna, are you hurt? I'm fine. Just then, an explosion rocked the building. Jest, completely consumed by the dark magic, had transformed into a demonic entity. Dozens of mages rushed forward to attack, but their spells seemed to have no effect. The demonic energy is too strong, her sorrows explained. Ordinary magic won't work. Only the power of naming can defeat him. Assel's naming, the invisible Thanatos, and Sienna's naming, the evolving her sorrows, combined would be enough. Their powers merged, becoming a blinding light that struck the demonic being. Finally, it vanished. The crowd erupted in cheers, relieved and awestruck. Assel and Sienna breathed a collective sigh of relief. On the way back to the Grand Duke's estate, Sienna replayed the recent events in her mind. Jest, a staunch supporter of her sister, Lorena, was dead, and his demise had occurred even before Lorena had officially entered the Grand Duke's household. Was it all just a coincidence? The Cradle of the Moon room, once Lorena's, was now hers. Her sorrows, destroyed by Lorena in her past life, was now by her side. The gem mine, which should have belonged to Lorena, was now hers as well. Even if she had intended to change everything in this life, such a complete reversal of fortune seemed improbable. What was really going on? In the Grand Duke's office, the adjutant presented the report on the kidnapping. Jest's demonic transformation had been alarmingly advanced. If Sienna hadn't ignited the purifying flames, a full-scale demonic incursion might have erupted. The Grand Duke, however, was puzzled. Why had Jest been overtaken by demonic energy so suddenly? According to the adjutant's investigation, Jest's daughter's remains had been found at the scene, preserved by a spell. It seemed he had been driven by the desire to revive her. But Jest himself possessed no magical ability. Someone else must have cast the preservation spell. The Grand Duke sensed something amiss. According to Sienna's account, Jest had intended to sacrifice her to bring his daughter back. But was this truly a delusion brought on by demonic influence, or was someone else coveting Sienna's power? The Grand Duke ordered the adjutant to seal off the scene and dispatch his raven messengers. This matter had to be thoroughly investigated. Ever since Sienna's near-death experience, her sorrows had been consumed with worry. To improve Sienna's chances of survival in future emergencies, her sorrows decided to put her through special training. Special training? Isn't that a bit much? If I die, you can just find another master, Sienna retorted flippantly. What kind of talk is that? The little flame kicked her, indignant. You are the master I chose out of thousands. How many times do I have to tell you? You're so careless with your own life. Have you no consideration for my feelings? Seeing her sorrows' hurt expression, Sienna realized her words had been too harsh. Her sorrows reiterated. Besides you, I have no intention of having any other master. A memory from her past life flashed through Sienna's mind. She asked her sorrows, is there a way to destroy a naming? What did you say? The small flame flared into a raging inferno. You actually want to destroy me? Sienna quickly explained. That's not what I meant. Just listen to me. I've been reincarnated. After hearing Sienna's story, her sorrows began to understand. Sienna couldn't explain why it had happened, but in her past life, she hadn't been her sorrows' master. Moreover, her sorrows had been destroyed. The little flame pondered for a moment. Are you sure I was destroyed? Is it possible I was stolen, replaced with a fake? Sienna thought it was a possibility. But why would Lorena do that? Even if Lorena hadn't done anything to her sorrows, she was still an exceptionally talented mage. Lorena possessed a rare healing ability. She had once extended the life of the dying emperor by a whole year, earning her widespread fame as a healing mage. Then, could it be that she stole me because she didn't want me to be your naming? Sienna wondered. But by then, my magic had already been taken. Could I still have become your master? Even so, I would have chosen you as my master. Sienna's heart skipped a beat. Even without magic, you would have chosen me? Her sorrows insisted on the special training. Constantly running and hiding won't bring you peace. To prevent Lorena from destroying you again, you must become stronger. Her sorrows nestled against Sienna's hand. Don't worry, you're not alone. Our naming is eternal. I will always be on your side, so your enemies are my enemies. I will always be with you. The sudden, heartfelt promise caught Sienna off guard. Those words warmed the most vulnerable corners of her heart. The weight and resentment she had held onto for so long finally melted into tears. Lorena had inflicted the deepest wounds of her past life. She had resolved to trust no one, pushing everyone away. But deep down, she yearned for warmth and love. I will always be on your side. These words gave Sienna immeasurable strength. Her sorrows, she declared, I've decided. I'll do whatever it takes. I will become the greatest healer. Living like a coward is enough. I've done that for one lifetime. I don't know what the future holds, but I will reach the highest peak, and I will carve her sorrows' name there. The her sorrows who chose me, no matter what. The her sorrows who will always be with me. Season 1 finale. After facing life and death, Sienna resolves to change. She casts off the timid, fearful girl of the past. Her newfound confidence and radiance even startled the Grand Duke. Something about this child is different, he mused, inquiring after Sienna's health. Thanks to your concern, I'm fine now, Sienna replied, meeting his gaze with a bright smile, no longer shrinking away. Thanks to young Master Assel's timely rescue. But I was truly frightened. The Grand Duke questioned her further about the incident. The old Sienna would have kept quiet, but the new Sienna would use every opportunity to achieve her goals. Gesturing as she spoke, Sienna recounted, Jess suddenly pulled a knife on me. The Grand Duke gasped. He dared to threaten you with a knife? I was terrified and cried for help, but no one came. I had some minor disagreements with the other young ladies. Sienna revealed the bullying she had endured. The Grand Duke's fury ignited. His precious Sienna, subjected to such humiliation. Lady Dahlia, whom I assigned to look after you, what was she doing? She was busy socializing. She didn't notice me, Sienna replied, her voice laced with Even when I was threatened with a knife, she completely ignored me. The Grand Duke's heart ached. No one has the right to order you around. They dared to disregard my orders and disrespect you. Unforgivable. He decreed the stripping of Viscount Jest and Lady Dahlia's titles. Their families were to be exiled and all their assets seized. Furthermore, those who had bullied Sienna were forbidden from ever setting foot in the Grand Duke's estate again. The Grand Duke Nate was the center of power. His word was law. This effectively ostracized those families from the rest of the nobility. Those who had mocked Sienna for being a commoner were now commoners themselves. The irony was not lost on anyone. Whispers spread quickly. The nobility realized the extent of the Grand Duke's favor toward Sienna. No one dared to cross her again. They marveled at his judgment. An orphan, not only the master of a naming, but also a healer. Some even considered adopting orphans, hoping to replicate his luck. That day, her sorrows officially began Sienna's special training. She had been practicing accumulating magical power with Master Seth. Now, it was time to show the results. Sienna closed her eyes. She felt the magical energy swirling around the core of her heart, slowly gathering in her palm. A brilliant magical domain coalesced and took shape. This was the beginning, the first glimpse of a world, the nascent form of a vast domain. The world Sienna manifested with her magic for the very first time. On her first attempt, she had successfully manifested her own domain. The little flame was immensely pleased. As expected of the master, I so carefully chose. Under my brilliant tutelage, you're destined for greatness. He also urged Sienna to furnish him with a proper dwelling. Didn't I get you those essence gems? Her sorrows grumbled, deeply dissatisfied with the rough, uncut stones. Can a pile of raw materials in an empty space truly be called a home? Sienna advised him to be content and settle in. How can such cold, heartless words come from your 36-degree mouth? She teased. It's all my fault for being so foolish. Her sorrows sulked, dramatically drifting into the small house's cabinet to wallow in self-pity. I chose the wrong master. Exasperated, Sienna relented. Lord her sorrows, I apologize. I was just joking. Earlier, to appease Sienna, the Grand Duke had asked if she desired anything. Sienna requested access to the treasury to search for her sorrows' true form. To her surprise, the Grand Duke was incredibly generous, allowing her to take whatever she wished. Her sorrows, peeking out, preened. Now this is the master I approve of. The treasury held a vast collection of priceless treasures, legacies from prosperous eras, and ancient artifacts whose purpose remained a mystery. Michael reassured Sienna, explaining that they had previously purged the treasury of dangerous items, so it shouldn't be too perilous. That being said, he added, there might still be some dangerous things inside. Indeed, Michael continued, making a spooky face. There might even be scary magical beasts. The Grand Duke, observing their playful banter, intervened. Don't frighten her, Michael. The Grand Duke, intrigued by their closeness, inquired when they had become so friendly. Michael, beaming, boasted that he was the closest to Sienna in the entire household, even closer than Assel. Sienna's thoughts drifted. If there hadn't been misunderstandings in her past life, would Michael have been this kind to her then? The treasury's magic only permitted entry to direct descendants of the Nate family or those who had consumed a pomegranate. It also possessed the unique ability to guide individuals towards what they needed most. However, only one person could enter at a time. The Grand Duke reassured Sienna not to worry. The treasury would never harm someone recognized by the Nate, he assured her. Prepared, Sienna declared, I'll return safely. With that, she stepped alone into the dark doorway. In the pitch-black, unknown space, only a trail of glowing footprints illuminated her path, seemingly guiding her forward. Her sorrows urged her to be cautious, although he sensed no immediate danger. Suddenly, Sienna stopped, realizing she stood before Assel's room. Confused, she thought, how is this possible? I entered the treasury, yet I'm here. She called out to her sorrows, but received no response. Then, she noticed the glowing footprints continued into the room. Knowing Assel should be at the military academy, Sienna cautiously entered. To her astonishment, Assel stood inside. Sensing her presence, Assel turned, his expression a mixture of pain and disbelief. The girl he longed for stood before him. He couldn't believe his eyes. Is this a dream? He wondered. Sienna, however, was panicked. Assel should be at the academy. Why was he acting so strangely? A chilling familiarity washed over her. Could this be Assel from my past life? She realized. As he approached, Sienna turned and fled. She had to escape, but Assel pursued her, his voice filled with anguish. Sienna, wait. Despite his pleas, she didn't stop. This had to be an illusion conjured by the treasury. The Grand Duke had said the treasury would provide what its visitors truly desired. Sienna refused to believe it. Could it be that, deep down, she yearned for Assel to search for her so desperately? Just then, Sienna burst through a doorway. As the door slammed shut, the man's near-pleading voice continued. Sienna, please don't go. Sienna leaned against the door, gasping for breath. Then she heard her sorrows' voice. When she came to her senses, she found herself in an unfamiliar place. When we got here, her sorrows explained, you suddenly lost consciousness, as if you'd been hit by some kind of illusion magic. His words brought her a small measure of relief. So it had all been a dream. Suddenly, something rolled to Sienna's feet. It was a smoking pipe, remarkably antique in style, likely a relic from the prosperous era. Her sorrows circled the pipe, examining it intently. Sienna, I want to use this as my home, he declared. It has both fire-resistant and enhancement magic, and there's even a gem for me to reside in. It's practically tailor-made for me. Her sorrows was smitten. Sienna, however, was less enthusiastic. Isn't it a bit inappropriate for a young girl like me to carry this around? She protested. I don't care, I want it. Her sorrows insisted. Or I won't live. Didn't you say I could have anything I wanted? He reminded her. Besides, the treasury chooses what's best suited for you. So this pipe is the best choice. Sienna sighed, resigned to her fate. She couldn't believe that, at such a young age, she'd be carrying around a smoking pipe. She took out an essence gem and placed it at the mouthpiece. After a flash of blinding light, the gem was perfectly embedded, seamlessly merging with the pipe. Sienna tested it, and with just a touch of magic, she summoned a powerful flame. The dissipating smoke even purified the surrounding air. Just then, another object fell at Sienna's feet. It was a signet ring. Her sorrows felt an inexplicable draw to the ring's aura and urged Sienna to take it as well. When Sienna emerged from the treasury, she found the Grand Duke and Michael waiting for her. They were surprised she'd returned in less than 10 minutes, while Sienna felt like she'd been inside for ages. Can ancient magic alter the flow of time? She wondered, seeing the pipe in Sienna's hand. Both the Grand Duke and Michael were taken aback. Sienna, do you remember how old you are? It was her sorrows who said he liked it, Sienna explained. His taste is certainly unique, Michael commented. Her sorrows bristled. That brat dares criticize my taste? Sienna, defend me. But the family continued to chat and laugh, leaving the little flame fuming. As soon as the tutor dismissed the class, Sienna eagerly began asking questions. Michael, impressed by her diligence, teased, "You just study all day long. Is learning really that interesting?" "Of course it is," Sienna exclaimed. "The more I learn, the more I know." Through learning, Sienna realized that in her past life, it wasn't just her magic that had been taken from her, but also the joy and opportunities of life. Since creating her own domain, Sienna had become engrossed in its vibrant world. Watching her domain expand, nurturing this world that belonged solely to her, filled her with immense joy. The multicolored world, shimmering with starlight, invigorated her every day. That day, Sienna returned to the orphanage. As soon as she stepped out of the carriage, she embraced Lisa warmly. Lisa, seeing the transformation in Sienna, was astonished. "You truly have the air of a noble lady now." Michael had accompanied Sienna on this visit. Lisa eagerly inquired about Sienna's well-being. "I'm doing very well," Sienna replied. "Everyone is kind to me. At least, they were until Lorena appeared." Sienna noted the changes in the orphanage since her last visit. The drafty windows were gone, and the place was much cleaner. Since Lisa had become the director, the living conditions had greatly improved. Michael, however, was incredulous. "This is considered much improved," he thought, taking in the cracked glass and dilapidated walls. The staircase creaked ominously underfoot, each step threatening to give way. The musty smell of decay permeated the air. Even when entertaining guests, the tea was a weak, grainy brew, and the biscuits, of dubious origin, were dark and hard. Food like this, Michael thought, wouldn't even be offered to the servants at the Nate estate. He struggled to imagine what it must have been like before. Lisa, recalling the previous director's tenure, shuddered. She was so miserly, she wouldn't even throw away onion skins. She'd boil them into a broth for the children, without even a pinch of seasoning. The taste was dreadful. "Now, at least, the children have decent meals," she continued, "and they're no longer constantly hungry." Occasionally, Lisa would even bake these cookies for the children, a treat Sienna had always longed for. A delicacy reserved only for the director and guests. Michael was stunned. The biscuits he found barely edible were a dreamed-of treat for these children. Watching Sienna's wistful smile, a pang of guilt struck him. What kind of life had Sienna endured? Lisa, filled with remorse for not having taken better care of her, sighed. "If only Sienna were still here," she lamented. "I could look after her properly, and she wouldn't have to suffer like she did before. I'm sure I would have been happy living in an orphanage run by you," Sienna said softly. "But Sienna," Lisa reminded her gently, "you're in Nate now. You won't be coming back here." Sienna was surprised by Michael's sharp intake of breath. Lisa quickly apologized. "I misspoke," she said. "Of course, Sienna belongs at the Grand Duke's estate." Michael, recovering from his initial shock, realized his outburst was unwarranted. He had visited commoner districts before and thought he understood their lives to some extent. But only today did the true hardship of their existence truly sink in. Sienna had grown up in this environment, and he shuddered to think what else she might have endured. Lisa explained that the orphanage had recently received numerous donations from nobles. After Sienna's public introduction, a wave of adoptions had swept through the aristocracy. While many had ulterior motives, she admitted, some were genuinely moved to donate after witnessing the orphanage's plight. All too soon, it was time to leave. Sienna hugged Lisa goodbye, reluctant to part. Michael had never seen Sienna so relaxed. At the estate, she always maintained a certain distance, like a guest, from everyone. He even suspected she believed that if a more magically gifted orphan appeared, she would be sent back to the orphanage. Why did she seem to yearn for this life? On the way home from the orphanage, Sienna was still basking in the warmth of the brief reunion. Beside her, Michael was consumed with worry. Sienna had mentioned returning to the orphanage. What if she went back so often? That one day she simply stayed? "Sienna," he he blurted out. You shouldn't go back to the orphanage anymore. Sienna found Michael's behavior baffling. He had insisted on accompanying her, interrupted her conversation with Lisa, and now he was forbidding her from returning to the orphanage. I have the Grand Duke's permission to visit, she pointed out. I was granted on my very first day at the Nate estate. Michael's voice rose in desperation. Did you plan on returning to the orphanage all along? Yes, Sienna replied calmly. After all, it's where I've always lived. Neither of them understood the other's perspective, and an argument erupted in the carriage. Michael couldn't fathom why Sienna was so drawn to the orphanage. Do you hate the Nate estate that much? He demanded. Do you hate us? Even if I did, Sienna retorted, I am still a Nate. Yes, I know, she said quietly, turning away from him. Michael, knowing she wouldn't listen, fell silent, defeated. A few days later, Lisa was busy in the orphanage garden. When she looked up and saw Sienna had returned, a little worried, Lisa asked, Is it really all right for you to visit so often? Would my visits bother you? Sienna asked. Of course not, Lisa exclaimed. If you come often, those nobles will donate even more money, just to impress you. Sienna laughed at Lisa's playful teasing. When Lisa asked if Michael had come with her, Sienna paused. Since our argument, Sienna said, we haven't seen each other. In her past life, she would have been terrified of angering him and would have avoided the orphanage altogether. But now she didn't care. It was inevitable. Once Lorena appeared, or once Michael misunderstood her relationship with Assel, their fragile friendship would shatter anyway. Sienna told Lisa that Michael was busy and couldn't make it. Just then, someone shouted for Lisa, saying the child in room 6 had snuck into the back room again. A new troublemaker? Sienna wondered. Lisa asked Sienna to wait in the director's office. Upon entering, Sienna noticed the door was slightly ajar. Seeing a bit of fabric peeking out from under the clothes closet door, Sienna instantly knew the child was hiding inside. If it were me, Sienna called out to the closet, I would have hidden much better. But using the back room as a decoy, that's pretty clever. The closet door creaked open, revealing a small boy with dark hair and blue eyes, huddled inside, eyeing Sienna warily. Who are you? Who else could I be? Sienna replied with a smile. I'm one of the ones who lived here before you. Despite the boy's obvious apprehension, Sienna was confident she could handle him. She extended a hand. Are you going to stay in there all day? Lisa, exhausted after searching the back room, returned to her office, only to find the boy she'd been looking for fast asleep in Sienna's lap. Lisa couldn't help but smile at the sight. This little one, she explained, was transferred from another orphanage. He's been so resistant, so closed off. I can't believe he's opened up to you. Sienna reassured Lisa that she had spoken to the boy, and he promised to behave. Soon, it was time for Sienna to leave, but the boy, now clinging tightly to her, begged her not to go, ignoring Lisa's attempts to coax him away. Sienna whispered something in his ear. The boy looked up at her. You promise? Of course, Sienna replied. But you have to keep your promise too. As Sienna was leaving, Lisa asked what she had said to the boy who had never been so obedient. I just told him I'd come back again. And what did he promise you? Before Sienna could answer, the boy suddenly appeared behind Lisa, bowing his head and apologizing. He then confessed to all the mischief he had caused. We made a deal, he explained. Sienna promised to come back if I confessed everything. Only if I'm good, he added. Back at the Nate estate, Sienna gazed out the window, lost in thought. It had been a month since her arrival. According to the timeline of her past life, Lorena's arrival was still more than 4 months away. Even though many things had unfolded differently, Sienna couldn't shake a feeling of unease. She feared that all her efforts, all the changes she had made, would be meaningless in the face of Lorena's power. She had hoped things would improve, but her relationship with Michael was now strained. This incident had made one thing clear. Goodwill from others was fleeting and ultimately insignificant. She needed concrete achievements, tangible changes, to prepare for Lorena's arrival. The Emperor's illness came to mind. In her past life, the Emperor had suddenly fallen gravely ill. It was Lorena who had prolonged his life for a year, earning her the title of Healing Angel. Even after the Emperor's death, Lorena, hailed as a hero, stood beside the Crown Prince during the state funeral. What if I were the one to heal the Emperor? Sienna mused. Her sorrows encouraged her to try. Healing and evolution stem from the same source, so it wasn't entirely impossible. After that incident, Lorena had gained the support of the Empire and the favor of the royal family. Suddenly, a thought struck Sienna. How had a healthy emperor fallen so ill so suddenly? And how had Lorena been so perfectly positioned to heal him? Was it all truly a coincidence? Could this all be a conspiracy from the very beginning? Sienna wondered aloud. Her sorrows, perched on her shoulder, looked thoughtful. If that's the case, he chirped, we need to confirm whether the emperor is truly ill. If this is Lorena's scheme, she might act prematurely to keep you in check. She desperately needs an offensive power to rival a named master. Meanwhile, the Grand Duke received news. A person possessing the long-lost healing magic had appeared in the Empire. This person was none other than Lady Lorena of the Montseer Earldom. Lady Lorena of the Montseer Earldom, a healing magician? The news of her possessing the extinct healing bloodline spread like wildfire. Some even began comparing her to Sienna. Is the Montseer family only releasing this information now because they're worried about Sienna, the named master? Some gossip. Preposterous. Why would a noble like Lady Lorena care about an orphan? Her sorrows, upon hearing the news, was filled with competitive spirit. He urged Sienna to cultivate her healing magic as well. We can't lose to that brat, he insisted. But there hasn't been anyone capable of wielding two types of magic simultaneously in ages, Sienna pointed out. She didn't want to waste time on something unnecessary. It would be more beneficial to focus on her evolution magic and improve her skills as a healer. Sienna knew Lorena's healing ability could only be used on one person at a time. In her past life, Lorena had only used her healing powers when absolutely necessary. As a result, she was constantly pestered by nobles hoping for cures to their chronic ailments. Lorena would regretfully inform them that after extending the emperor's lifespan, she could no longer use her healing magic. She would then depart, leaving behind a chorus of groans. It was Sienna who was then accosted by the disappointed nobles, demanding she relay their pleas to Lorena. Sienna, feeling for her sister, had refused their unreasonable requests. But her refusal had only angered them. You're just an orphan. How dare you refuse me? You think you're something special just because you spend time with Lady Lorena? You dare look down on us? Have you forgotten your place? They had even resorted to violence. If I had Lorena's healing abilities now, those people would be hounding me too, Sienna thought. She didn't want to be put in that position just for the sake of status. Being her sorrows' master was more than enough for her. Her sorrows, deeply touched by her unexpected sentiment, declared, forget that healing magic. You're my master, after all. But what about the Emperor's illness? Sienna pondered. If it's a conspiracy, it's best to resolve it before he even falls ill. But how can I even meet the Emperor? She worried. Her sorrows found her concern baffling. You're usually so clever. Why are you being silly now? He chirped. But don't worry, you're cute even when you're silly. Before Sienna could figure out how to meet the Emperor, the Grand Duke informed her that the Emperor had been wanting to meet her. The Grand Duke had declined the previous two requests, but this time there was no justifiable reason to refuse. It was then that Sienna realized, as a named master, being summoned by the Emperor was perfectly normal. She had been fretting over finding a way to meet him for nothing. How silly she had been. Upon hearing she was to be received by the Emperor, Sienna was ecstatic and eager to go. However, the Grand Duke's expression was troubled. He told Sienna not to force herself. She didn't have to go if she didn't want to. But Sienna didn't want to miss this opportunity. As a subject, it's my honor to meet His Majesty, she declared. The Grand Duke's face grew even more somber. Sienna assumed he was worried she would cause trouble in front of the Emperor. She assured him she would diligently study etiquette and wouldn't disgrace the Nate family. The Grand Duke's expression darkened further. Did this child not understand his hints? Very well, he finally said. Since you wish to go, I will send a reply to His Majesty. He watched Sienna's excitement with a heavy heart. Her sorrows couldn't stop giggling. My little master is so adorably clueless, he chirped. The Grand Duke is so obviously trying to stop her from going, and she hasn't even noticed. In the palace gardens, the Emperor admired the scenery. Duke Eurus approached to pay his respects. The Emperor waved a dismissive hand. Speak your piece and be gone, he commanded. Eurus presented the Grand Duke's reply. Without even opening the envelope, the Emperor tossed it aside. Duke Eurus, unfazed, retreated, as if accustomed to the Emperor's behavior. Once alone, the Emperor retrieved the letter. After reading it, he couldn't contain his excitement. Finally, he murmured, I can meet that child. It was time for class. Sienna hesitated at the classroom door. She and Michael hadn't spoken since their argument. She didn't want to stop attending classes just to avoid an awkward encounter. Aren't you going in? What are you doing standing there? Michael had arrived at the door as well. His expression was neutral, but his gaze was fixed on Sienna's shoes. Sienna glanced down, realizing she was wearing the red leather shoes he had given her. Her maid had chosen them for her outfit. It felt strange wearing his gift while they were still at odds. "Seems you're quite fond of those shoes," Michael observed. "They just happened to match my outfit today," Sienna explained. Michael said nothing more and entered the classroom with her. He hoped Sienna would understand what truly mattered. Throughout the lesson, his gaze remained fixed on her, making Sienna uneasy. She couldn't tell if he was still angry. Today's lesson was about malice. Malice, the teacher explained, is a sinister energy that festers within the heart, stemming from human ill will and sin. Baron Jest and Isabel, along with her mother, are prime examples. Because humans inherently harbor malice, it's difficult to detect the symptoms of malice infestation before they manifest. But Sienna had clearly seen a black aura in the eyes of both Jest and Isabel. When she had mentioned this to her sorrows, he had explained that, unlike humans, he could sense malice. And now, as his master, Sienna shared that ability. Furthermore, this ability would be a great asset to Sienna's healing career. She could perceive the malice within others. Her sorrows had urged her to keep this a secret. Such a powerful ability, while helpful, could also attract unwanted envy. The teacher then introduced the 4 ranks of magical beasts. Uncommon, she explained, is the lowest rank. These beasts have lost all reason, driven only by the instinct to kill and devour. Baron Jest, for example. Rare, the 3rd rank, are beasts that can recognize and cooperate with each other. Scarce, the 2nd rank, can mimic humans to a certain extent and utilize dark magic. And finally, Epic, the highest rank, are beasts that surpass human capabilities. Sienna and Michael exchanged a nervous glance. Before dismissing the class, the teacher assigned homework. Research a representative incident for each rank of magical beast. Michael asked Sienna about her plans for the day. Sienna, having no reason to hide it, told him she was going to the orphanage. Michael simply reminded her to be careful and suggested they work on their homework together when she returned. His calm reaction surprised Sienna. He wasn't angry. Arriving at the orphanage, Sienna was accompanied by 2 guards, assigned by the Grand Duke. Lisa was tending to a group of children. The children, upon seeing Sienna, swarmed her, excitedly calling her teacher from room 6. The scene quickly became chaotic, prompting Lisa to usher the children off to bathe. The guards discreetly withdrew, allowing Sienna and Lisa to talk privately. Sienna worried Lisa might comment on the guards' presence, but Lisa seemed pleased. "It shows how much the Grand Duke values you," Lisa remarked. "And because of your regular visits, the donations from the nobles have increased significantly. Their motives might not be entirely pure. Most of them have ulterior motives, but the funding is genuinely improving the orphanage. The teachers and the children are all so grateful to you." Ever since Lisa had called her teacher from room 6, the nickname had caught on among the children. Even the quiet boy, whom Sienna privately thought of as Little Deer, used it. Sienna was always gentle with the children and often played with them, so she was quite popular. Little Deer suddenly appeared, startling Lisa. Another teacher had come to ask for Lisa's help. After Lisa left, Little Deer stayed with Sienna. He pulled out the book Sienna had lent him and began discussing its contents. Sienna was surprised by how much he knew. He was so young, yet he understood so much of the book. Many of his qualities set him apart from the other children. "Have you been listening to Lisa?" Sienna asked gently. "I try my best," Little Deer replied. "If only teacher Lisa wouldn't use so many rhyming words like brush brush and tooth tooth, I think I could listen even better." The girl had barely left the orphanage grounds when she sensed something was amiss. The woods were eerily silent. There was no wind, no birdsong. The carriage that had been waiting for her was gone. Sienna deduced they had entered some kind of magical array, but she didn't sense any malice. Whoever was responsible didn't seem to intend them harm. Suddenly, footsteps approached. The guards immediately moved to protect Sienna. In a blink, both guards vanished. A large gate materialized before Sienna. Her sorrows reassured her that there was no danger. Sienna, too, sensed a powerful presence, a welcoming one. She stepped through the gate. Lush greenery surrounded her, vines parting to make way for her passage. Sienna reached the center of the courtyard and saw an old man. "You're right on time, child," he said. Sienna gasped. It was the emperor. "Don't be afraid," he said kindly. "I'm just an old man passing through." His gentle demeanor eased Sienna's apprehension. "I heard a kind and beautiful child had become a named master," the emperor continued, "and I wanted to see you for myself." Just then, footsteps rustled in the nearby bushes. It was the Grand Duke. He looked exasperated. "You shouldn't play these jokes," he chided the emperor. "Well, you kept hiding her from me," the emperor retorted. "So you lured us to the imperial gardens. Is that it, uncle?" The emperor was the Grand Duke's uncle. Her sorrows whispered to Sienna, urging her to focus on the emperor. Sienna took a deep breath, concentrating her senses, focusing her gaze. She saw it then, a disturbing aura surrounding the emperor. His heart was completely saturated with malice. Sienna was stunned. The malice she had seen in Isabel and Baron Jest was nothing. Compared to this, even that small amount had been enough to transform them into magical beasts. If the malice within the emperor erupted, he would surely die. If it were just his life at stake, the damage might be contained. But if this much malice were unleashed at a mana convergence point, the consequences would be catastrophic. It could trigger the emergence of countless rare-ranked magical beasts, sparking a war. The people here would face utter devastation. This level of malice couldn't have occurred naturally. It had to be deliberate. Sienna thought of Lorena. What had she done to the emperor? Since her rebirth, Sienna had witnessed the changes in the Grand Duke and the others. She had secretly hoped that Lorena might have changed, that she wouldn't be the same as before. But this proved Lorena hadn't changed at all. Not only had she deceived Sienna, but she had also sacrificed the emperor's life and deceived the entire empire. Sienna could barely contain her fury. This time, she had to stop Lorena's scheme. The emperor's heart was consumed by malice, and it was all her wicked sister's doing. Sienna suspected the emperor himself must have sensed it. After all, the imperial family was the most powerful lineage of healers in the world, and this entire garden was the emperor's domain. He must be using its purifying power to suppress the malice as much as possible. Because only healers could purify malice, Lorena's healing powers alone could only extend the emperor's life by a year at most. An idea sparked in Sienna's mind. She would join forces with her sorrows to cure the emperor. This way, Sienna wouldn't just be caught up in events. She would be directly confronting Lorena. The emperor invited Sienna to try some sweets. The imperial sweets were indeed far more exquisite than the Grand Duchess's. In her past life, Sienna had only seen them among the gifts the imperial family sent to Lorena. Lorena would display the imperial gifts, sharing them with the nobles around her. Now, Sienna realized it was likely to show off the special treatment she received from the imperial family. Sienna took a bite of cake, but the taste wasn't particularly impressive. It seemed the real appeal was the prestige of the imperial name. Sienna's well-behaved manner charmed the emperor. He couldn't understand how such a lovely child had been snatched away by the Grand Duke. He invited Sienna to stroll through the gardens with him. Sienna's heart leaped. This was the perfect opportunity to talk to the emperor. But would it be rude to leave the Grand Duke alone? The Grand Duke reassured her, urging her to go. He's one of the best healers in the empire. He'll teach you a lot. The two of them walked along a path through the trees. The emperor asked Sienna if she had been startled by an old man's sudden appearance. "I hope you understand. Healers tend to attract a crowd. Because healers can purify malice, people feel refreshed in their presence." Sienna finally understood why everyone was so kind to her. "Then, Your Majesty, I'm a healer too," she blurted out. The emperor's kindly expression shifted to one of scrutiny. "Did I reveal my identity to you?" Sienna froze. She hadn't met the emperor in this life. How could she have called him Your Majesty? Thinking quickly, she said, "Because only His Majesty could speak so intimately with the Grand Duke." Sienna's quick wit dispelled the emperor's suspicion. They reached a deeper part of the woods. But instead of lush vegetation, they found an area overgrown with weeds, a desolate sight. This garden was the emperor's domain, a world shaped by his imagination. The emperor looked at the weeds, his expression grave. "Has this happened because you are ill?" Sienna asked. "Perhaps. Do you think I'm ill? Yes, Sienna replied, because there's something dark on your heart. The emperor was taken aback. Child, can you see it? His exclamation drew the Grand Duke's attention. Sienna explained to the emperor that because she shared a vision with her sorrows, she could see the malice. I see, the emperor murmured. Faced with the Grand Duke's questioning, he decided to stop hiding the truth. My child, he said, my time is running out. The emperor's sudden announcement that he was dying startled the Grand Duke. He pressed the emperor for an explanation. It turned out that not long ago, the emperor had collapsed while attending to state affairs. Although he was advanced in years, he had always been in good health. His sudden collapse had caused considerable alarm. The crown prince had even told the emperor that if his time was near, he should inform the empire beforehand. This surprised the emperor greatly. But after waking from his brief period of unconsciousness, the emperor felt no different. Even the imperial physician declared him to be in perfect health. The emperor assumed the matter was settled. However, he later discovered a startling amount of malice accumulating within him. He hadn't told anyone but the crown prince about this discovery. The Grand Duke looked at the emperor with concern. The emperor, however, was still in the mood to joke, inviting the Grand Duke to his coming-of-age ceremony, implying his funeral. The Grand Duke was utterly speechless, and the two began to bicker again. Sienna, who had been quietly listening, asked, Your Majesty, is the malice making you ill? The emperor, startled, remembered Sienna's presence. He softly asked her to keep this a secret, not to breathe a word to anyone. But Sienna replied, I can make the malice disappear. The emperor was relieved, but he knew his condition was severe, not something Sienna could handle alone. Even Sienna had never seen such a concentrated amount of malice before. And if the malice erupted where mana flowed, it would spawn countless magical beasts. That's why you chose to stay within your domain, Sienna realized. You don't want to hurt anyone. The emperor was astonished by Sienna's accurate assessment of the situation. You're right. Staying here is the best way to contain the malice. He turned to scold the Grand Duke. You always praise her intelligence, don't you? When introducing a child like this, of course you should use the word genius. Honestly, what if those gossip mongers underestimated her because of your modesty? The Grand Duke was completely dumbfounded by the emperor's words. He admitted he'd been too humble before and vowed to boast about Sienna's genius everywhere he went. Her sorrows chimed in. Of course she's a genius. Just look who she chose as her master. Sienna watched them, bewildered. Then, the emperor bent down, wanting to see Sienna's name. Her sorrows, he prompted. Sienna presented her sorrows in his true form. The emperor examined him closely. I'd heard her sorrows had changed his form. Is this a small magic wand? Quite a unique design. The more he looked, the more puzzled he became. Wait, isn't this a smoking pipe? You didn't choose this yourself, did you? Sienna quickly explained. No, her sorrows likes it. The emperor was relieved. He'd thought Sienna's taste had gone astray. He smiled at her. It's an honor to meet her sorrows and his master. Named are mysterious, their origins unknown. And you have become the master of one of the most enigmatic and perhaps the most powerful of them all, her sorrows. The Grand Duke urged the emperor to heed Sienna's offer. He insisted Sienna and her sorrows could heal him. But the emperor hesitated. He couldn't give Sienna a definite answer, because another child had also offered to heal him. That child was Lady Lorena, who had recently awakened as a healing magician.